All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I'd like to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board meeting for September 9th, 2019. If the gentlemen would please remove their hats and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thanks again for being with us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our participants up front here before we get going. I'll start on my far right with Miss Lynn Town, our clerk of the board. Right here should be Superintendent Steve Cook. He is running late from another appointment, and we're going to go ahead and get going without him, and hopefully we'll see him here shortly. To my immediate left is Miss Lisa May, our vice chair, Mr. Tom Hearn, board member, Miss Tamber Pickford, board member, and Miss Jen Brumley, board member. My name's Casey Morsrow, and I'm the board chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of the meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board in writing through our clerk. Ms. Town, is there addendum? No addendum tonight, right? Okay. So is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And first up here is board recognition. I'm going to ask Seth to take the podium. There he is. Thank you, Seth. Good evening.
You bet. Good evening. I'm Seth Denniston, Director of Technology for the school district. And it's my honor to present this Board Award of Excellence tonight to my friend and peer, Abe Wallin. Abe works with the University of Idaho Regional Math Center. And Abe, you can come up, Abe. I just wanted to honor Abe for all the work he does supporting our district with professional development in general, with math teaching specifically. A lot of our administrators and teachers have gone through the mathematical thinking strategies with Abe, including Dr. Cook this summer. He does a great job with both that class and just his support of our district in general. So thank you, Abe, for all that you and the University of Idaho do to support us.
Thank you.
And usually Dr. Cook asks if you wanted to say anything. No, he's good. Awesome. Thanks.
And you didn't make him come up in front either. How nice of you, Seth. Well, thank you, Abe. I've served on math ad hoc with Abe last year, and I think Miss Pickford did the year before. So we know you put a lot of time in with our district, so thank you. Okay, board comments. We didn't have anything down there. I just wanted to mention we had Russ McLean was here earlier, and he has been out in the community. You may have seen it. I think there was an article in the paper, but he's trying to gauge interest in starting an ROTC program back up in our high schools. And he came in. He had to leave. He was going to present public comment, but just wanted to let us know that's going well. He's getting a lot of support. He hopes to bring a little more information back to Dr. Cook and hopefully bring something back to the district in that. So. Okay, high school student body reports. I'm going to start with Coeur d'Alene High tonight. Good evening.
I think so. Board Chairman Morsrow and other esteemed members of the board, thank you for having me today. My name is Megan Corrett, and I'm the ASB president at Coeur d'Alene High School. With me, I have Ashley Murphy and Parker Drexel. They are the ASB secretary and the ASB vice president. Unfortunately, Geneva Bankston, our treasurer, could not be here with us tonight. She had a soccer game. We have a lot of fun things going on at CHS right now, and a couple big changes. So first off, The student council at CHS has become a class-based system rather than committees. So now we have presidents and vice presidents, as well as 6 representatives at the head of each of our classes. In 2 weeks, we'll be electing our freshman representatives. And so everybody's busy filling out their applications and running their campaigns for that. We are also working on bringing back several traditions here at CHS, one of being the Blue Zoo crew. So that's basically a group of boys, juniors and seniors, who are in charge of getting the student section super excited and pumped up for all the games. We are also at the Viking ship in our practice field. We're going to be raising a sail that has all the senior signatures and handprints on it, which is a tradition that CHS used to have and hasn't done in about 10 years. So we're bringing that back. This Thursday, we have Senior Start, which is an eagerly anticipated event every year. The Booster Club will be grilling burgers. We'll have snow cones, lots of fun games, a paint war, and all the seniors are really looking forward to that. And then the second week of October is going to be our homecoming week. That week we'll have spirit activities. We'll have powder puff on Wednesday. On Thursday we'll have the parade. Friday we'll have the football game, and then Saturday will be our dance. We're busy preparing for that and just getting ready for all the upcoming events. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Megan. All right, Lake City High School, have you guys come up next?
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Cook, if he was here, and district administration. My name is Jacob Baker, and I am the ASB president at Lake City High School. Also with me tonight is Vice President Sam Putrin, ASB Secretary Emily Damshin, and ASB Treasurer Carter Gordon. We're off to a great start this year at Lake City. We had our orientation and open house on Wednesday, August 28th, which was very successful. Our freshman class is huge, and we have some great programs in place to get them involved this year, including Freshman Connection on September 20th. So we're looking forward to implementing those throughout the year. Our student council also had our annual summer retreat 2 weeks ago to come together as a team and start planning homecoming. In addition, Lake City is working hard to give our students a running start into the post-secondary education. Seniors enrolled in college prep classes will be going through the application processes soon, as well as going on 2 campus visits this fall. We're also hosting All Things Seniors on Tuesday, September 24th at 5:30 p.m. and would like to welcome everyone to join us as we give seniors tools and resources to navigate through their final year in high school. Homecoming is also right around the corner. Our Homecoming Spirit Week begins next Monday, September 16th. Our parade will be downtown on Sherman on Friday, September 20th, starting at 4. This year, our homecoming theme is Heroes of Homecoming, and we're using this event to recognize and honor our local first responders. We feel that our first responders don't get enough recognition from the young people in our community for everything they do for us, so we wanted to take this wonderful opportunity to thank them during our biggest event of the year. Our parade grand marshals will be representatives from local police, fire, and EMT. All first responders are also invited to our football game on the night of the 20th, where they will receive free entry, free popcorn, and a free t-shirt. They will also receive and be recognized during our halftime show, emceed by our favorite announcer, Mike Nelson. Our homecoming dance will be on Saturday, September 21st at 7 p.m. We would like to invite the school board community to attend the parade and game. We're looking forward to showing our school pride and also beating Lakeland. We have a lot of big things coming up this fall, including community service projects and more college preparation, in addition to school spirit events and supporting our fall sports teams and arts programs. We've also been informed that we have 2 National Merit Scholars at Lake City, and we're looking forward to announcing their names once they've been released, and we'll keep you posted throughout the rest of the year. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to come and speak with you tonight, and we'll see you again next month.
Thank you. And next up, Venture High School.
Good evening. My name is Brianna, and I'm a junior at Venture. Today we went to Camp Luther Haven for a day of team building and goal setting. All Venture teachers will do a full day of design thinking at Gizmos on October 4th. This is great for students because it means more creative, hands-on problem solving in the classroom. This year we are doing an hour wellness each week as part of our advisories. These classes are an opportunity to learn and experience a variety of hobbies and activities for physical and emotional wellness. Every teacher will offer a class to teach something they personally really enjoy. The class will include wall climbing, music, theater, cooking, fly tying, bicycling, golf, and many other options. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, I'm super excited to welcome Kim Ziegler, the CEA president here, I think for the first time with us. Maybe were you here at the end of last school year? Yeah, in May. Don't get offended, the kids always get up and leave right now. It's not you, I promise. But Kim's here to give the Coeur d'Alene Education Association report. Welcome.
Good evening, Board Chair Morris Rowe, esteemed board members, Superintendent Cook in spirit, Lynn, district employees, and public. Thank you for allowing me to come here tonight and present to you. I would like to share some of the things that I'm grateful for this school year. First, the board has showed tremendous support to our students by asking the community for what we needed in our levy. Not only did this help bring the biggest pay raise to our staff, but it meant many, many needs for our kids. And that's what we're really all here for, is for the kids. So we thank you for that. Next, there are things that our school district's teachers appreciate that you might not always hear about. Not only did they appreciate the big pay raise, but they appreciate the support they receive from you all year long. And then the last thing is the district and the board have worked so well to move the direction of the school district in the correct direction by getting outside input and receiving that information in stride and working to make things greater for our staff and students. I would also like to thank each one of you for being so welcoming of me in my new role as president. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Ms. Town, anyone signed up for public comment? And he's let me know he was leaving. Okay, so no one signed up for public comment tonight. So we might get out of here early today. And I may have spoke too soon. Hey, I'm knocking on wood now. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda here. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A through I?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion on those? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries, Ms. Town. And we are moving on to our finance presentation. Good evening, Ms. Ebner.
Good evening, Chair Morrisroe, members of the board. I'm going to go through our presentation that we worked through on Friday. I think just the nature of that meeting landing at the end of the week, it's really hard for members of the community to attend, so we thought it would be beneficial to go through that here at the regular board meeting. So I'll just get started here, and please stop me with any questions. Okay, so our agenda for this presentation, first we're going to look at what the first 3 days of attendance data looks like compared to prior year. And we're going to walk through how an emergency levy is calculated. We'll discuss needs that we noted in the first week of school due to an increase in students, as well as look at the preliminary tax rates and how an emergency levy would affect those tax rates. And spoiler alert here for anyone who isn't aware, we did not pass an emergency levy at that meeting, and hopefully just going through this presentation will make it clear as to why that was not. So the attendance data, I've got a summary here. The first 3 days, an average of students attending for the current school year compared to the first 3 days of the prior school year. And so it's kind of a way to look at where the growth is, which schools, and we have some dips in enrollment at some schools as well. And our net increase was 162 students. You'll see there in the bottom right-hand corner. So in order to calculate what a district qualifies for with an emergency levy, you take the increase in students, which is the 162, and you can multiply it by the state gives us a formula to calculate a per student revenue figure. And so that is based off of, it's not something that we just kind of come up with ourselves. There's a formula that we have to follow that the state gives us, and that takes our state funding divided by the total number of attendance days in the district. And so what that came out to was just under $900,000 could have been certified for an emergency levy. And when we go through this exercise each year, we take a look at what the needs are compared to, or what the needs are that are created by unanticipated growth. And so the whole reason that the emergency levy exists in the state of Idaho is that you have the students, you have more students than you have in prior years, and you don't know if they're going to keep showing up in order to earn you money in the state formula. So you have this opportunity to pass an emergency levy in order to meet those needs and not put yourself in a tough budget situation where you're spending, but you don't know whether or not you're going to get the revenues. So the needs that we looked at, there's quite the list here. And these are the most critical needs. There are needs throughout our district, but we know we wouldn't be able to meet everything, but we just looked at what's most critical. And it came out to $136,000. One other need that we looked at was lockers at the middle school level. And unfortunately, we didn't put that in the critical needs list because there is the option that students can double up and share with lockers. So that's just something that we kind of kept in mind that will have to be addressed in the coming years, especially with growth at the middle school level. Okay, so with those identified needs, we felt, district admin felt that it was possible that with anticipated units, with growth in our student population, we would likely earn more support units. And so we could meet those needs with the additional revenues generated by having additional students. So taking a look at our tax rates, there's a lot of numbers up here, but basically we looked at we calculated out the tax rate we're going to certify our levy rates here pretty soon. And so we came to, there would be a 12% drop in the levy rate. So $1.95 per, or $1.96 per $1,000 of taxable assessed value is where it landed. Prior year, it was $2.23. So that's a decrease in our tax rate. And then we looked at, just for fun, what it would be had the full emergency levy been certified, and that would still be a decrease. But led us into this discussion of during the levy informational campaign, we calculated that we could base a levy increase on new construction growth in our taxable market. And that would create the capacity in order for us to increase the levy, but not have much of an effect on taxpayers that had assessed value increases. So what we looked at was what was the average assessed value increase or average across the market increase in the market based on assessed value changes, and 13.66% was that number. So basically, if a taxpayer has an increase at or below 13.66% in their taxable assessed value, their overall tax bill should remain flat with the way that the levy rate is. So we looked at some actual examples. These are real houses in our taxing district. And so one house, we kind of looked at how the assessed value increased over the years. And this house number one, we'll just go through this one. Going from 2016 to 2017 was a 6.13% increase in taxable assessed value. Going from 2017 to 2018 was an 18.16% increase in taxable assessed value. So we assumed, let's say they had the same increase as last year, their tax bill would be up about $20 because they're over that magic 13.66% number. And then we looked at the same scenarios if the board opted to certify the emergency levy. So that $20 increase would become a $40 increase. So the recommendation from administration to the board was to absorb the most urgent needs within the general fund. And this would drop our tax rate from the $2.23 to the $1.96. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Evner. That's a lot of information there in a quick time, so thank you. Okay, we're moving on to action items here. And
I had a question on the other part of the finance, the revised bond. And as I was scrolling through it, do you have it up there, Katie? And it might be clear if it probably will make sense to you, but as I was going through it, it looks as though this is the most updated report we have. And what's different now is that the project budget has changed to the amount that we actually spent on the project. So I was wondering, for bookkeeping and just for historical purposes, would it be able to leave the project budget as it was set, 18 months ago, and then in the project actual expenditures, we could list that, and then whatever was left and used, on subsequent projects, lakes or the new elementary school, and then we could show it. I think when you look on here, it's confusing for me, and it took me a few minutes to figure it out, and I feel like if somebody was going back, looking through our records, they might say, well, that's peculiar. We from May to September, the project budget changed, and it looks as though every project spent the exact amount that it was allocated for, so it looks kind of weird on paper. And I knew what you were doing with that, but does that make sense?
So at this point, what I did was the projects that are complete, they used to have each budget going month to month was amended. For example, we'll take Dalton. If a change order came through on the general contract line item, we would move from the unbudgeted contingency up to, but the total dollar value of the project was always the same for each project until we hit this point where we had quite a few projects that were complete. So we moved from, at that point, there was all the remaining funds were on the unbudgeted contingency line. So we'd moved the unbudgeted contingency, sort of rearranged it to match how the projects were, because what I didn't want was projects that we've accepted, for example, lakes and the new elementary or the Nexa site had a revised budget that would have exceeded what, or the contract would have exceeded. So what I can do is I can probably, our software isn't the greatest as like creating a public report like this, but what I could try and do is put another column and show at least what the total original Dalton Elementary budget was,
Yeah,
just to see
I
it.
think that would be fine. I think this was the best addition, to this current bond project. And I remember the reason that we created the spreadsheet was so we could avoid, past experiences where projects maybe didn't get the money that was allocated to them. So I think it's important to demonstrate, at least at some point, what the allocated initial budget was. And then the board gave directives to the district to go ahead and spend unencumbered funds on future projects. So if this spreadsheet could reflect that, and even if it was as easy like adult, and I have the one for May, and the budget was 3.1, if we could leave that initial project budget somewhere reflected, unencumbered funds then can go down into, whatever project they were spent on. But I think it'll be less confusing down the road as we're reviewing prior bond projects, and some people might be like, well, wait, I thought Dalton had this much, but we spent this much. And
I can certainly try and add a column. I'm trying to work through how it would work. I don't want to make a promise because of the limitations of the software. We could pull this report into Excel, and then I'm able to add my own, data entry on that. But I think the goal on this worksheet was that it's one spot coming directly from our software, so that a clerical error can't be made as far as.
I think we could even put an asterisk maybe, under Dalton and say initial project budget 3.1 million.
Sure.
And then, the new project budget became 2.9, but it just somewhere referencing. So I think the board's done a really good job of making sure that projects were completed, and that was our promise to the community. I think this is just one more step in saying, okay, we're
I think what I
demonstrating
could
funds.
do is edit the PDF and add that on there if that would be acceptable. Okay, great.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Ebner? All right. Thank you, Katie. All right, now we're going to move on to action items. And the first one up here is the Long Range Planning Committee. We need to approve their membership, something we do annually. And they've got a bunch of new people there, like they do every year, where they rotate people out. So, Ms. May, as the current liaison, anything you want to say there?
No, I think Mr. Anderson's here. Do you want to comment on your new committee, or do you want me to?
I have nothing to add, no.
Yeah, I think they did a great job recruiting. I think, as you can see, we have a large number of first-year members that are excited, ready kind of to get to work. Would this be an okay time to kind of go over a request that they have and that Mr. Anderson has going forward for what we're expecting of the committee? I think I touched on it maybe the last meeting, but maybe it wasn't specific enough. And so just making sure that I can clearly articulate to them what we're looking for as far as a recommendation in the spring. But I can also wait till my board comment time. Whatever your pleasure.
Board reports. We could do it there. Why don't we finish the action part? I think we should do it at committee reports, probably, right? Talk about long-range planning, do you think, or can we do it here?
Talking about assigning the task
Uh-huh.
to the long-range planning committee, it would be appropriate here.
It is, okay. All right, let's approve the membership first, just so I keep it straight in my head, and then let's have that talk there.
I'll move to approve the long-range planning committee as presented for 2019-2020.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion there? I would just say, echo what Ms. May said. They did a nice job getting the word out, and we've got a lot of great people there, including a number of alternates, which I think it's been a few years since we've had some alternates, so great to see that. So it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Now, Ms. May, you are long-range planning is looking for some direction from us.
Yeah, and I think that we were at agenda planning today, and we were kind of getting ready, looking for their next meeting. And because we have two parallel projects running at the same time, I think it becomes difficult to discern what is the goal or outcome for long-range planning, and really what is the board specifically wanting from them so they can get to work and provide us with information that will be useful. I think Mr. Anderson made a good point that some of the information that long-range planning needs is underway with Flow Analytics, and so they won't be able to do some of their work until they have that information, which they think will probably be available December ish, depending on when they get to work, and that's demographics, projections. But I think being really clear, what we're looking for. I think the curriculum audit had a recommendation for long-range planning, and I would imagine that that's probably some of what we're looking for is getting to work on a long-range facilities plan. But I wanted to make sure that I understood correctly what we were all looking for, so I could explain that to them.
Thoughts? Someone want to start? Not all at once.
Okay, so my input would be, is obviously we want them to work collaboratively, come up with a strong set of committee members to work with flow analytics and those recommendations. I see their role being probably bigger though than just the committee. For example, I think flow analytics is going to need information that it may end up coming back to the committee for, such as if you're looking for what's the available land and input on, what might be that land used for. That may be things that they could come back to the entire committee, like the entire long-range planning committee for input, as opposed to just that small group that's going to work hand in hand with them. So maybe those committee members need to be coming back to long range on some of I just would like to see the larger committee's input going to the smaller committee to make sure Flow has more than just those 5 committee members' input. So that's what I see as being the major tasks in this first probably 4 months that they're together. And then I don't know that we can define beyond that what the long-range planning committee would do, because I think it's going to come out of Flow's recommendations. But I think the direction would be is that they then follow up on whatever may be recommendations coming from Flow on asset acquiring, on what they might say about boundaries, and follow-up that needs to be done on some investigating or researching in those areas. I see this as being the continuation of that long-range plan. Those are just kind of quick comments.
I just have a question. I mean, and maybe this is I should have an obvious answer to this, but will the long-range planning committee have some recommendation about what we do with Hayden Lake Elementary School? I know there's been that discussion in the past that's been put on hold for a year or two. I think we still need to. Now, I assume Flow Analytics, I assume, is going to be involved in it. I just want to know kind of where we're at on that issue.
Yeah, and I think that's why they wanted some clarification, because topics like that are big topics that can derail a committee work. And so I think they wanted to ensure that we're not getting on a sidebar. And so I think that's just my opinion, might be a sidebar that long-range planning may not dabble into this year. They might focus more on a long-range plan that would include analysis of current assets, but it may not be a definitive decision that, unless the board would like that, and I could give them direction on that. But I think that's what they wanted, is to make sure that, if that's what the project would be, then they're clear and their intent is set. So if that's something we want them to look at, then they will do, but I don't think they had that in their sights. I think overall asset evaluation was kind of what they were thinking.
So that would be included in the overall asset evaluation, as you're saying. I mean, because, once Nexus moves out next year, then that will be sitting empty again. And then becomes the question it was a couple years ago. What do we do with it? Do we build on that site again? Do we sell it? What do we do? So, okay. Well, so I assume it's going to be covered under that study, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, what I would like to see, or what I'm hopeful we'll see at the end of the year, is some, a real solid recommendation of something that's going to cover us over the next at least 3 years, I would say, because I think you look at our middle schools especially, we've had some huge growth this year. We know we're super crowded in middle schools, and I think we need to, as a board, begin setting our sights on when are we going to run another bond, because I think we know at some point here we're going to have to run another bond. We know there's needs at the elementary school, and there's certainly this year there's big needs at middle school when you have one school over 900 students. So I'm hoping at the end of the year we have kind of a solid plan. They've worked with Eric Herringer and done the bond planning, and a proposal of how we can move forward with that.
Would you like to see some timeframes in that recommendation if they have a presentation from Eric Herringer, like a rough ballpark, or nothing that specific? Because they have done that in the past, and you guys, I think one time we presented August and you guys kind of molded over, we came back and I think you guys decided on March maybe, or just more blueprint saying, okay, middle schools are really stressed, we need to focus on middle elementary.
I don't think a time frame would be bad. I mean, it's a start. They did a time frame before, and it gives us an opportunity to take a look at it and see where we're at. And I definitely agree with the middle school that we also know that we have huge numbers in our 4th and 5th grade classes that are soon to be at the middle school. So for me, I'm leaning, actually, all of it sounds great.
The one concern I have, I guess, for long-range planning and for Jerry is I'm concerned that they get drawn into the boundaries discussion just too much and that bogs them down, and I'm hoping that won't be the case, because I think that's one of those we've learned from the past, that it can be kind of an emotional type decision, and the reason we brought in someone was to make it more data driven as far as finding solutions there. And so I'm hopeful they don't get just bogged down with that. I think it's important that we have a plan from them at the end of the year, because I don't think we're too far off from needing to consider and to start talking to the community at large about what those needs are and what's the appetite for supporting it. I think what we saw next door is a plan on paper. If their community isn't supportive, it's not going anywhere. So I think whatever it is, once the plan's done, then we need to gauge community support and see if is it a big chunk? Is it in phases? All those sorts of things. We may have to figure that out through community polling kind of afterwards. So,
Jerry, since you're here, not to put you on the spot, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any input?
To put you on the spot.
Since you asked.
Just for anyone watching at home, Jerry Anderson's the chair currently of Long Range Planning.
Is this on or off? Yeah. There we go. What our concern is that we are going to be participating with the Flow committee, and I hear a number of maybe 5 of our members. We had thought maybe it was going to be more than that. I don't know if there's been a number determined there. Is that the case?
No, I think Jen was just generally speaking. When you mentioned
Okay.
5, I think, yeah, no,
All
I
right.
don't think it's changed.
So we're a little bit flexible there, but we see a lot of their activity paralleling what we would normally be doing. And at the end of last year, we actually, in a way, presented a report that reflected some of the information that you're suggesting we should come up with by the end of this year. And I guess what I see there is maybe we just have to be more specific, provide more specific dates, possibly some dollar amounts and things like that would give you a little bit more information to go on. But the one thing we don't want to do is see this process drag on for a year or 2 years or whatever. We'd like to bring it to a head and move on to that middle school and elementary school that we really need. And land, of course, has to come first. And at some point, we really need to do that before the schools can even happen. So those are some of the thoughts in our head as we had that conversation today and previously also. So we just want to be able to move is what we'd like to do. So thank you.
Well, I'd just like to publicly thank Jerry. He's been committed to this committee for several years now, and without him, he's keeping them moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Well, I think that helps. So thank you, and I will bring that information on behalf of the board to the committee on Monday, and or whoever attends the meeting, and we can I think it helps them kind of get focused. It helps Jerry for the year and set expectations for what their work plan entails.
Okay, that reminds me, we maybe need to figure out our process here, but we have select board liaison, because that's when we've typically done it kind of historically. I think we did it in January this past year, no? Okay. Okay, so we're doing it when we seat the new committee. Okay, so we need to pick one of us to serve on that board. I know Ms. May has done so in the past, and sounds like would like the opportunity to keep doing so. All right, so
Then I would nominate Miss May as the long-range planning liaison.
I'll second that.
okay. Do we have to take action for that? No. Okay. Ms. May, it is you.
You get a pick. You're the
Oh, all right.
chief designer. Then I did want to bring up, I was reading through our annual meeting, and it says in our new, that we're picking our liaison, so maybe we need to update. Yeah.
Because
We did not do it, yeah, I went back and looked. But.
in January.
Okay. Moving on here. Item C is our ad hoc committee on school start times. I see Dr. Cottle up at the podium. Lucky Dr. Cottle.
Yeah. Good evening, Chair Morrisroe and trustees. I'm excited because this committee, the Start Times Committee, the application has been out since June, so we've had 3 months. The application process closed on August 31st, and we had a total of 34 patrons and community members and parents apply. We had 16 staff members apply, and we're very excited because we wanted a large number for this committee as the task is very great. In your packet, you will see we went through the list and we're actually selecting everyone. We strategically selected some participants that we're recommending to be on the committee, and everyone else that we didn't select in the first round, we would like to keep them on an alternate list. We have a feeling as we delve into it, we may need some more folks, or because of the time commitment, we may have some folks that choose not to serve. What we did is when we looked at everyone, we tried to find a mix of people that were parents as well as not parents. We tried to look at their professions and how they could add to the conversation. If they had students, we looked at what schools their students attended. We did have quite a few staff members and parents that were heavy as far as Canfield and Coeur d'Alene High School went, so we had to try to make some selections that way. But again, we wanted some diversity. We also wanted to make sure that we included more patrons and parents than we did staff members. I am excited about the staff member list because we have folks on there that are non-instructional that will be impacted, and we'll bring basically their area of expertise and how it impacts them to the table. For example, transportation and food service, and we have some childcare in there as well. So again, knowing that it's a large responsibility, we would like to recommend this list, those on the committee, as well as a list of alternates to you for your consideration.
I'll just say I'm impressed by the list. I've read it over, and I was a nice cross-section of people with different kinds of professions and interests, and it's great. Thank you for putting this together. It looks like a good group.
Yeah, we don't usually see this. We're usually trying to reach out to get people on these committees, so this must be a very hot topic.
Yes, hot topic. And then Scott Maben worked his magic, between social media and everything. I think we were able to reach a large audience.
Important, especially when if there is a change and we're trying to get community involved, community aware of what's going on, to have all these community members and parents and stuff already, serving on this ad hoc committee, it makes it a little bit easier for getting the information out.
I agree, because we'll probably have several meetings where we'll be doing outreach, and we'll need a lot of folks on hand to do that.
Just say the one thing that surprised me on here and kind of raised my eyebrows a little was just high school seemed a little underrepresented in the staff area. I was surprised there's not coaches or, I think I did see Jim Phillips from band and orchestra, but that one surprised me a little bit.
Yes, we had to do some recruiting. I think it'll help having Jim Winger on there, but I think we'll end up having to do some outreach because there are some folks that are underrepresented. Okay, so I don't think I saw a motion in the board packet, but is there a motion to approve the ad hoc committee as presented?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Ms. Town? And next item up, this we had last month for information, was a request to change the name of Lakes.
I know you're gonna do liaison.
Oh. All right, I gotta back up. Okay, we gotta pick a liaison for school start times. Any volunteers?
Guess I'm out. I do it.
Oh, awesome.
And I can team it. Yeah, let's
Okay, so Ms. Brumley, Ms. Pickford have volunteered to co-liaison that. Okay, perfect. We will go with that. Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to move on to Lakes. And this was a request we had for information last week, or last month, where Lakes was requesting to change the name from Lakes Magnet Middle School to Lakes Middle School. It was out for public review, and we had no comments received. So, I don't think we need any discussion on this. Is there a motion to approve the request as presented?
Make a motion to approve the request to change the name from Lakes Magnet Middle School to Lakes Middle School.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay. This next one, can we rearrange the deck? I feel like we need to have Dr. Cook here for the action on the satellite medical. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right, so item E, we're going to wait and hope to see Dr. Cook here shortly, and we'll come back to that one. Ms. Town, don't let me forget, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this next item is, I think, a first since I've been on the board. But as you know, we have lots of bids that come through, and we had an objection to a bid, and looks like Mr. Voeller's coming up to us, but I'll invite you up.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman Morris Rowe, members of the board. Just wanted to kind of give you guys a brief summary. I think you guys saw the letter that we received from Coleman, so they did object to our fuel bid. And ultimately, what they were objecting to is the distance that we were using to measure the travel to the fuel dispensary. And so we looked at several different options of how can we compute this to be fair about it. And ultimately, with consult with legal, we just decided probably to be really clear about how we are going to consult that and send it out to rebid so that it is fairly considered for everybody. Part of the process moving forward is we actually want to continue consulting with the state, Idaho State Department of Transportation, to get some clarification from them, because ultimately JMT is right across the street from our bus transportation. And so do we use zero? Do we need to have a factor in for that? And that's what we need some further clarification for the state so that we can be really clear on how we're going to present this as we go back out for rebid with it. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Is there any questions for Mr. Voeller on what was in our packet? Okay.
So you're saying it sounds like a reasonable.
Yeah, I think it raised enough questions that, you know, we should be very, very clear on how we are going to project this, whether we don't use any mileage to JMT because it's right across the street, or do we have a factor, and how do we do it so that it is very consistent, and do we do it one way or do we do it round trip? And so those are questions that we felt like we need to really work out and refine on this. And, you know, it hasn't ever been questioned in the past because it's never been this close. Like, it came down to a $9 difference in a $200,000 bid. So, you know, it was very, very close. And so we felt like their objection is reasonable, but we need to be really clear and then let all parties have the opportunity to rebid with the new standards that we really clarify how we want it to look.
Remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're supposed to take the lesser amount, but that's awfully close, and they probably, I would imagine those numbers you're talking about could change things. Anyway, I'm fine with making a motion that the board elect to rebid the fuel RFP due to ambiguity with respect to the measuring of travel distances to the fuel dispensary.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. I have heard from Dr. Cook. He's on his way. So we should see him, I'd say, in 15 minutes or so. So we will keep chugging along here and probably give him a hard time that our meetings seem to be a little shorter when he's not here. So next up is policy for action. And I believe we just have one policy tonight. Ms. Town, this was a legal change.
There was one legal change. Mr. Deniston brought that to our attention. It was a reference to an Idaho Code statute, and that's been corrected. The other change is not necessarily a legal change. However, we came across an issue with special ed contracts, contracts for services for students with IEPs. And some of those contracts end up being over $50,000. At the beginning of this school year, we had to have services being provided on the first day of school. So those contracts were there, but we don't have the luxury to wait for the next board meeting to get approval on a contract over $50,000. So this would give us an exception to allow approval of those contracts for those special education students in those situations. And Mrs. Ebner and I worked together to create this language from a previous policy. So if you have any questions.
Okay. Seeing none, hearing none. Is there a motion to approve 7407 as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I guess it's just for emergencies, it sound like, right? Beginning of the school year where you just need the money now to get services for
It's
I need
situations where
students.
we have to provide service. By law, we have to provide these services. And whether or not we've had time to bring it to the board for approval, that's where the problem has been. So this allows the superintendent or the designee, which in this case would be Mr. Meyer, the special ed director, to approve any contract over $50,000 without board approval. The board is
Okay,
notified.
okay, I just-
Yeah.
I just wondered.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Town. All right, we are into our information items. And there she is. Hi, Kate. For the first one here is our new teacher induction program.
Yeah, I brought an entourage here, and you guys are incredibly ahead of schedule, so I'm so glad that they showed up even earlier than I asked them to be.
We're ahead of schedule, aren't we?
I get a chance to talk to you guys just to share an update about our new teacher induction program, and as I was considering this and doing some research. I feel like I'm pretty, that's good. As I was doing some research this summer and kind of looking over some of the feedback, these guys kind of stood out to me, and so I invited them to come share their experience as participating in it this year, and then I'll go through some of the things that took place last year and some of our goals for this year. So is there any order you'd like to go? Should we start with Mr. Lilliquist? Okay, thank you. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good evening, Board Chair Morris Rowe and fellow members of the board. Thank you for having us here tonight, or Kate for volunteering us to be here tonight, I should say. I just wanted to say a few words in support of our new teacher program. I want to actually read a quick little quote. I was working on some professional development before I came over and came across this quote, and I thought it was very fitting for what we were discussing tonight. And the quote says this: "What happens inside classrooms is the most intriguing, grueling, exhilarating, life-giving, energy-zapping, heartbreaking, joy-filled, complex, and intellectually demanding work in the world." And so with that in mind, who wouldn't need a mentor along the way, right? And really, guys, it is, those of you in the room have been a teacher, and those who haven't, it is a grueling job. And in the beginning, there is probably thousands of questions that you have, and it's really nice to have that go-to person. And in our case, Ben is he's in his second year this year, and Ginny Whiteside is his mentor. And they're really just invaluable to these new folks. And usually when I hire somebody in their first or second year, one of the first questions they ask is, "Nick, do I have a mentor?" And it's really nice to be able to say that we do have this program. So thank you for supporting this program. And Ben and Ginny, do you have any?
Hi guys, my name is Ben Dodson. I teach 7th grade and 8th grade language arts at Canfield, and this is my second year over there. As someone who comes from subbing, I subbed for a few years before I became a teacher. I really know what it's like to have that kind of fight or flight response when you enter a classroom. You don't really know what to do, and you're just kind of trying to survive. Did that for a few years, but as soon as I got into my official position here at Canfield, just having that mentor meant the world to just making sure I got off on the right foot. And Ginny has been an exceptional mentor this whole time, and just knowing I have that person that I'm allowed to bug every day and not feel like it's something I'm doing wrong is really awesome. Because I'll just like poke my head into her room probably 3 times a day and just talk about what's going on and just see what she's thinking and what's going on. And really, really valuable to make sure that that's there for us new teachers. And I can't express how important that is moving forward, to just have that person who's always listening. And she's not the only one I bug, but definitely can't speak enough good about it. So I hope that it can evolve and get better and become more a concrete part of just the way teachers learn and grow when they start their career. So yeah, I mean, that's about all I've got to say. Just, I love it a lot.
Hello, everybody. So this is my 21st year teaching, and I still remember my first year, and I still remember my mentor, Kathy Bays. I was teaching first grade, and my mentor, she just retired last year, and I remember writing her a letter and just telling her how if it wasn't for her, and I can't even compare to her, I mean, whatever I'm doing for Ben, it was nothing compared to this woman. But I remember writing her a letter and just telling her, I don't know if I would have understood how that this job is doable without you. And I remember going into her room and saying, what if I don't know how to teach all these kids to read, even though I'd had all the classes and everything? And she encouraged me. She just fueled me and validated so much. And I bumped into one of my first graders from my first year teaching last summer at a softball game, and I said, "How are you? Did you turn out okay?" And she is entering. She's going to be a police officer. She's just had her whole life, and she said everything. She loved first grade. So anyway, I also want to say, too, that every time you're a mentor to somebody else, you have to reconsider your own teaching, and you have to say, do I endorse this and why? And you kind of take a new look at everything you do. And I was lucky enough to teach Ben at LCSC, too, and then when he got hired for our school, I mean, it was just a great match, and he's going to be the best of the best, and he already has such a heart for kids, so it's pretty inspiring getting to be around that as well. So I just, whether there's a mentor program or not, teachers are always going to step up to mentor, and to have a program that actually supports that is just a high priority, I believe. So thank you.
So I want to thank you guys for coming. I won't make you stand up here, even though it does make me feel comfortable to have you. You guys are. Thank you for coming. As I was looking through the feedback and some of they shared some of this in their feedback, and it made me reflect on our district level goal of recruit and retain, and those are kind of lofty and somewhat vague terms. And these guys are kind of my user story of what a program can be and how we can help make this experience everybody's experience that's in it. And so I've said it probably 50 times since the school year has started. It's so nice not to be new and to have that year where I've seen how things are going and to get some insight into what we can improve. And so from the district level, we're trying to make sure that we are getting great people and that we are keeping great people. And I feel like there's a lot of best practice that we can start working toward and that we are working toward this year. So I'm in charge of this. The 2018-19 program, just some of the highlights of that. It was already established before I came, and so just wanted to evaluate, and then I also saw an opportunity to provide some optional professional development, which was not part of the original deal. So we had 67 participants and about 54 mentors. Some mentors were assigned more than one person, and that continues this year, especially if you've got a new, like your science department has just hired a few teachers and you've got a strong chair, you might assign those guys. So we had 67 participants. The criteria for us right now is teachers new to our district within their first or second year in our district. So Ben was new, and then he'll continue again this year in his second year, and within their first 5 years of teaching. And so the exceptions to this would be if we get a fifth year, a person with 5 years experience and they're solid. Maybe they've already been in another building similar to ours, and their principal says they're good. They don't need this official mentorship, but they still assign a go-to in their building. Or they come with maybe 10 years and they're just not, maybe they're new to our state or new to the position. And so principals might request that someone outside of that criteria join us, and we're happy to have those people. We connect them with a mentor. We asked this year, we asked that administrators take them on a kind of a learning walk where maybe the teacher identifies a problem of practice or something they're curious about, and the principal says, let's go to this classroom, and then they can talk about it. There was a form that they could walk through. The idea there being that they connect with their administrator and hear from the administrator the kinds of things that they look for in successful classrooms, especially around maybe a particular problem. This year, I offered with the instructional coaches, which was really cool. We offered an optional day of professional development, and I know that Ben and Nick joined us on at least one of those. Nick might have come to 2 of those, and it was really cool. It was fun to see Ben because I think did you sub or student teach at Lakes Middle School? There, it was really neat, and our coaches did a really good job of building in some of the vision and beliefs of our district around rigor and relevance and relationship, around opening our classrooms up to observers and being a public learner. And so that was optional last year. It wasn't part of the criteria. And so we just put it out there and said, if in addition to the learning walk or in lieu of the learning walk, if you want to join us for this, administrators and principals could join us. And that was really well received and a neat opportunity. And so we looked for ways to make that part of this year's training. Oh, I also have a library of books that I could offer new teachers that center around some of the things they're looking for. Maybe it's classroom management or classroom community, or we have this book that's really popular with elementary teachers that's called The First 6 Weeks. And it goes through like very strategic ways that teachers could build that community and routines in their classroom. So I also have a library, and I'm willing to grab some books if new teachers are looking for resources. Gave a survey to participants in the program, to our new teachers. And when I say new teachers, some are counselors, some are SLPs, and most are certified teachers. One of the questions we asked was about communication, and you'll see most people who responded, 83.3% said that the communication went both ways, having that go-to person, that they felt like they reached out equally. Some said their mentor reached out more to them than they put themselves out there, which is promising. We had one person where communication was lacking, and I know that that was buildings, separate buildings, and so I think that there was a disconnect there, and I worked to address that this year. Forget the other one. I think that's pretty good. Another point of feedback that I wanted to share with you guys was this. We're looking at retaining people. And so because of my mentorship, I feel better connected to my school curriculum and Coeur d'Alene schools. And that was, again, 83%. About 13% said I don't feel better connected to those things because of my mentorship, but I do feel connected. And one person didn't, who responded, didn't feel more connected. So those are things that we want to look at. When you look at what teachers say about why they stay, what helps them feel connected to a district or to a school or building, of course, we always take into consideration salary and benefits, but and to some extent, we've tried to control those things by looking at those through our negotiations and doing the best that we can for this side of the border. I think we're doing awesome. But outside of that, what keeps people, teachers around is those relationships. So it's with students and colleagues, administrators, parents. Do they feel a sense of belonging? Do they have trust? So that's what teachers tend to say when you are asking them about what keeps them in a building. And then I looked at the research. I was looking into some of our best practices. Relationships came up again. It's huge, and so all these efforts we make into making sure that this program is cohesive, that it's well-rounded, that it's addressing various things. We recognize that those relationships with our mentors and within the building are number one. We want to keep those positive. So, every month to our mentors, I send out newsletters, topics that are timely. Have you considered these things? Tips on how to be a good listener and check in, make your mentor feel connected. Professional development that is relevant and meaningful to new teachers. Part of the survey, when I asked for feedback, was what kind of professional development are you looking for? And so you'll see that kind of later as we embedded it into this year. From our stance, we looked at values and vision of our school and district. So even if you've had maybe 5 years somewhere else, Coeur d'Alene has some specific things that we work toward, and it helps if we're speaking that language and you're inviting those new teachers into our shared language and our shared vision. Like I said, topic specifics to their needs and interests of newer professionals. It can be some of the surfacey type things where we're looking at where's my go-to, who's going to tell me how staff meetings go here, or how to use the copy machine, or when I don't know how to get a professional leave form, what am I supposed to do? And then deeper into classroom communities, working with parents, making sure you're following procedures. And then the expectations of professionals, maybe our code of ethics and our Charlotte Danielson, how are we evaluated, those kinds of things. So this year, we've got 72 participants, last check, who fit that criteria of within their first 5 years of teaching and in first or second year with our district. We are, again, connecting them with mentors. One of the pieces of feedback that I got last year from a few were, oh gosh, if I could have chosen my mentor, or sometimes you get paired with them. I've been paired with a mentor 4 times now because I bump around a little bit. And sometimes you get paired with somebody that seems like a good fit, and then it ends up being that person right next door. And so some of the feedback was, I'd like to give input on who I have next year. So especially for teachers returning, I communicated that with principals if they had someone that they felt more comfortable with. But I've also noticed this year that a number of the principals, and we talked about this at the nuts and bolts meeting, that they could take a week and then consult with those new teachers to see if they've already got someone in mind or they've already formed a relationship, that they could take that into consideration. So a lot of the mentors have been assigned already, but there's a couple that are finishing up this week. The learning walk with an administrator is not required this year. We still have the materials for that. It's still, some schools are really strong in it as part of their teaching labs. as far as from the district level, making that a requirement, either needed to tighten it so that we knew who was responsible and when that needed to happen, or loosen it up considering the rest of the requirements and the things that are happening already in buildings this year. So I chose to loosen it this year. It's optional. But then we also are embedding 2 days of professional development where everyone gets to join us. We're splitting them K-5, 6-12. We've got an early one that's kind of that just-in-time shot in the arm that our teachers might be considering some of those topics that they gave us feedback on. And then we've got one that has our values, our beliefs about rigor, relevance, and relationships, about visiting each other's classrooms and those learning walks. So that will happen in January. So we've got those 2 days set up. In October, we're looking at how are we doing with building our classroom community? What do evaluations look like? How can we be prepared for some of those observations? How do we interact with parents? How are we doing with our 504s and IEPs? We've got some community resources lined up, including Gizmo, coming to talk about some of the things that we have here that are cool. And then in January, like I said, it's a deeper dive, some reflection, some forward planning. I think that's it. That's our presentation.
Well, I'm impressed by the program, and I'm also impressed, frankly, by the teachers, because I want to say one thing is that in my 6 years on the board, nothing can get me going faster and get me more upset when I hear people attacking our teachers, our teaching profession, because whenever I've gone into classrooms and sat there and watched, I am overwhelmed, and I'm frankly happy to be leaving. I'm overwhelmed by not only all the lives that you're affecting and all these things that are going on of all these kids, but the teacher's ability to stay on top of it, individualize their education, to be sensitive to their needs. I'm just incredibly impressed by the teaching profession. And sometimes I get really upset when people don't see it as profession. You'll see that sometimes in letters to the editor or something. They don't even call it a profession, and they just are misinformed. They don't know what the heck's going on. It's amazing sometimes the stuff I see in classrooms. And so anything you can do to help the teachers, this program sounds like a good one. And we have some excellent teachers in the school district, and I hope we retain them, and I appreciate your efforts along those lines.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I think we should. Welcome, Dr. Cook. Okay, so we did pretty well while you were traveling in. And
I need to miss more often. You guys.
We did skip over one action item, and that was item E, the satellite medical and mental health services item. So I think when you're ready here, we pick up there. I figured that was a good one that you should be here for. Okay, so I'm not sure who was handling that, actually. If that was starting with you?
Yeah, it'll start with me. We've got Nicole Pekarski and Jeff here for questions if they get quite detailed. Essentially, we are recommending the board approve an agreement with Heritage Health that would allow us to partner with them to provide, as you know, we're already providing some supplemental mental health services in several of our elementary schools, and we've been doing that for a period of about 3 years, I think. Anywhere from actually 5 different elementary schools have been in relationship with Heritage Health, and this current agreement, I think, would be with 3 of our elementary schools right now. And then we're also talking about extending the use of the mobile health clinic that agreement exists, and we've been running that with Venture High School for 1 year, I think, and we're looking to expand that to the other high schools as well. And so part of the conversation, there's a lot of things. We've been working on this for quite some time, and we anticipate what we're seeking today is board approval to start that relationship. We would be anticipating that it would expand over time eventually, but right now expanding the use of the mobile medical clinic through the use through the access points of the nurse's office, using a model of really consent that is sought out by the nurse in the school prior to access to the mobile health clinic. And we've been in conversation with Heritage Health that it would be likely for us to, once we seek this approval from you guys, once approved, that we would enter in some kind of an MOU agreement that would provide clarity on what consent would look like, so that as long as it's agreed upon by both entities, that we would continue to serve this needed community in all three of our high schools. And I think eventually we'd also like to try to expand services for mental health up to middle school and high school. But right now this was kind of a phase one of the agreement, and we would eventually, and I think Heritage Health would be interested in that as well, expand as services would allow and as costs would allow. When we first went for this request, the RFP was written for essentially, could we provide all of these services, so mental health supports across our K-12, also the mobile health clinic for high schools with zero cost to the district. And we've got several inquiries as to whether or not we thought that was realistic or possible, and whether or not we would have people willing to participate with this. This particular model doesn't have zero cost, but does do an insurance pay model. And so we think this is a great starting place, and we would like for you guys to consider approving this for students to access it. It's a little early, but we also have students in session, so we'd like to get this started as soon as possible. And so we'd like to at least answer your questions to get this thing going, and then I think probably build out the consent pathways. They're there in practice right now. The way that this was ran for the mobile health clinic, the way it was run at Venture last year, it was funneled through the nurse's office, so consent existed in the school. And we would like to see that probably codified in a policy that we'd bring back in the next 30 days or so for you guys' consideration. So, questions?
I just have some general questions that should be pretty easy. I don't know if I should Jeff or...
Start with me if they're easy.
Okay. Well, the first one is just on the actual page for the motion, and it says attachments, and it says requests for proposals, refer to addendum contract form P 11 through 15. I wasn't sure what that was referring to, and if it's something I needed to see before. So Jeff, you might be able to help me with that. And then the last sentence on that page, it says affordable health care services are provided without regard to a person's financial means or insurance status using a sliding fee schedule for discounted services. And so I know that we won't be transacting, the MOU will be for the designated hours. I think it's 8 to 12 or 6 to 12 hours per week at each high school. But, if we're approached by a community member, so as the student goes onto the bus and they say, yes, I have health insurance, then Heritage Health will engage in their transaction as far as recouping fee. In that transaction, if a student, for instance, has a high deductible plan, will they potentially have to agree to a sliding scale fee at that moment before they receive services? And I know a parent will, I just anticipate that.
You said they were going to be easy questions. No, so here's, the bottom line is the goal is to try to do it without any cost to the student, especially if there's insurance-bearing opportunities. If not, based upon the sliding scale, if students can't pay or don't have the ability to pay, then it can also be reimbursed to Medicaid. And so some of that will be into play, but as far as no student will ever be turned away. If they've gone through proper access to get access for the care, they will be provided that access.
So I guess I would like to see somewhere written in this MOU that no student will be turned away, even if they have insurance, but it's a high deductible plan, and so a sliding scale fee might apply to them. Could we ask for them to, like, going forward?
We can ask. Yeah, we can ask, but they would, depending on what, like, there's going to be a financial implication to that at some point.
So that's my next question, I guess, then on the fourth attachment on the Heritage Health proposal under page 5, operations of service free of charge to the district. So the last paragraph, we would expect that a limited range of services will not be billable to Medicaid or other insurance plans, and we will need to rely on some funding from the Coeur d'Alene School District to deliver these services. We will work with the district to identify the scope and cost of these services based on the service levels requested and the number of students serviced at each school. So I don't see anything reference that in the MOU. So I just wanted to kind of clear up this, because it seemed big, it made me feel a little uncomfortable, like, did they not mean to have that in there, or should we address that in the MOU?
Good evening. Chairman Mariz Rowe and members of the board. I do believe it was the intent of Heritage Health to have an agreement where no student would be turned away. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah,
and if for medical services.
These two things, these statements contradict kind of what we're saying up here, and so I just want to make sure before we agree to it, we're all clear on if we may be liable for some fee, or because that's kind of what this is saying in essence.
The second statement there, I do believe, is referring to mental health services that are provided at our title schools that the district does pay for. And I think that Heritage Health is sharing with us that they would need to maintain that financial relationship moving forward. And that is a slightly different funding model than medical services. So for those mental health services, we do have a contract with them for the last several years where we pay them for those services. And I think that they'll be anticipating, where available, billing Medicaid and using these monies to supplement and continue programming where funding is not available for mental health services. And then for the medical side, I would have to get that specific information for you on if a student must agree to payment at service. I do know that with the Federally Qualified Healthcare Center, FQHC funding, they anticipate providing care at no cost to some patients, and they have worked with us at Venture. Anytime you start out with something new, sometimes there's paperwork snafus, if you will, and so some of our students did unfortunately receive a bill in follow-up, and that was written off appropriately under our agreement with the services that they were provided and their insurance. So the hope and goal is that a student is never going to be out of money, out of pocket.
Right, and I imagine that was the intent of the agreement. I just felt as though maybe these two documents kind of contradicted one another, and I think if this is pertaining to mental health, maybe they should clarify that on their proposal so it would be clearer for us, because I don't think it's clear right now, and I imagine you're right, and I kind of thought that's what they were referring to, but because it's not clear in here, I don't want to see any of our students be out of pocket.
We can clean that up in the MOU.
Yeah, perfect. Make that assumption as I was reading.
And Ms. May, just to go back to your first question, where it was referring to pages 11 through 14, that was the actual MOU. It was just pointing you to the MOU that was part of the RFP. So it's just pointing you to that direction. Yep.
And I think this is fantastic. It's exciting that this program is moving forward. I hope that it's received well and our students have access to health care. That's fantastic.
I just wanted to ask a question. It's more a matter of a practical thing. You know, if I used to work in mental health. I had a clinic at one time, and one thing I learned is that there are certain kind of cases you can handle and some kind of cases you shouldn't handle. You know, some cases the person are either too dangerous or their diagnosis is such that you really need some actual expertise, you know, to treat that person so where, as a practical matter, how does that going to work? Let's say you have a student comes in to see one of the counselors that's through Heritage Health or through the school district, frankly, for that matter, and the kid has got a real severe mental illness or has got or is, you know, acutely suicidal? I mean, as a practical matter, the referral process work? Or is there a crisis team that would get together and say, this kid is more than we can handle in the school district, even through Heritage Health, and we should be sending him over to Kootenai Health or something? I mean, how does that work as a practical basis?
I do think that that's one of the strengths of this relationship that we are establishing, in that the folks that we have coming in to provide mental health services are subject matter experts, in that they are, as a part of Heritage Health, this is their specialty, working with children. And then because they're a part of the Heritage Health organization, they have access to those resources of a much larger group that is specializing in mental health and medical care. And so they would continue to follow their normal protocols as they would if caring for someone off-site, but it happens to be in our location that we're providing. And so they should have the very same supports that you're talking there. And our agreement would provide us some opportunity in the future to discuss that process and how that's going for students and families.
I just, I don't want to beat this issue too much, but I think there's a practical issue here. I mean, I know from my own experience, if I had a really severely mentally ill case, or somebody's got serious mental illness, one of the things I would do is immediately consult with one of my colleagues, usually a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and we would say, and that consultation was pretty immediate. Like, okay, we agree, this person needs to go to the hospital, and made sure they got there. Or this person's diagnosis is such that they clearly need some medication. And how can we get them over to their family doc today to give them the medication, or however that works? So I'm just wanting to make sure that those stuff is in place, because I think you're going to find that in the schools. You're going to find some kids who come in who are severely depressed or maybe psychotic or something. Mm-hmm. And just think it's important that that be in place. And maybe it is in place. I'm just keep thinking about my on-the-ground experience for many years is sometimes you have to have that referral system in place right now for immediate action of a severely troubled youth.
Yeah, these are some of the wonderful components of collegiality and being able to work with other professionals who have a shared experience with you. And I think Kate might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but the folks that we have providing mental health services are full-time employees of Heritage Health. And do we have 4 people?
We have 2 social workers that are connected with us.
Okay, so 2 social workers working in 3 schools. And so I would expect that they have these existing professional relationships within their organization and or would be supported to establish those.
And they'd have them within the school too, right? I mean,
that's
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got some protocols in place and really good relationships established right now. We have a new social worker coming on at Bora, so they're building that right now, but she's trained in TBRI, and we also have the student threat assessment protocol that we follow. So they keep close communication. Part of those 10 hours at each building is making those connections, not just with the administrator and the counselor, but also with the teachers, so that we're all on the same page.
What's the district liability if they mess up?
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? This is a practical matter. Let's say, I'm just saying that some kid doesn't get the help they need and they deteriorate or they have a suicide attempt or something like that. Where's the district liability on that, on this contract?
I think as long as we don't demonstrate negligence in the contract, we're fine. And that's the part that comes through the MOU and the agreement that we would establish, is that as long as we're following standard procedures and protocols, that both entities handle each aspect of that with full responsibility.
That's in place in the contract. I mean, I need to go reread that, make sure.
It would be in the MOU, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just, human behavior is not always predictable, and sometimes people, on the best intentions, things can go wrong. So I just want to know what the liability is of the district if something does go wrong. by a counselor making a decision that turned out not to be helpful to the kid.
Yeah. I'm not sure I know how to answer that beyond saying that as long as we don't demonstrate negligence in the situation, we're covered through ICRIMP, we're covered through our risk protocols.
I would think that's not a service we're providing. We're providing access to it. So to me, it would fall under Heritage, I would think. But I'm not an attorney. Miss Brumley's raising her eyebrows at me, but I don't know.
Well, I just, I mean, maybe listen, I know you're not the district's attorney, but you understand where I'm coming from?
No,
legally?
and I'm not speaking legally. The reason I raised my eyebrow is I'm like, what's the alternative, Tom? We don't do it. I guess we're offering an opportunity here that is really good for kids, and stuff happens, and you address those facts in that circumstance. And all I could say is back up what Dr. Cook said, which is, provided we're not negligent, which I would not anticipate that would ever happen, anything that happens is going to be working to do the very best possible under those people's skill set that they have there. But I'm not sure how addressing it like this and asking these questions, what do you want changed? What's the solution?
I'm not saying we don't do it. I'm just asking, I'm just wondering about, I mean, obviously I'm supportive, I will vote in favor of this. I'm supportive of the contract. I just want to know the kind of the professional supports in place and the consequences if things don't work out. But maybe those questions you're saying are being covered by the MOU. Maybe the district attorney needs to answer some of those questions. I don't know. I mean, I mean, you're right. I mean, as a practical matter, if in the field I was in, if the professional, the mental health worker was following what's called the quote standard of care, unquote, right? They're doing what is normal, what you're expected to do within your profession. Then you're protected, right? You're protected either by the law, or you're protected through your malpractice, or however you're protected. And so I would assume we're going to be meeting the standards of care here, you know.
So to be clear, we're talking about two different things here, right? We're talking about mental health services that we would be establishing, that we would actually be continuing at the elementary schools. And that contract's been in place for 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure how far it goes back. And that will be what we're asking for, is for that to continue and then potentially expand into middle school and high school over time as we get better at being able to that comes at a cost. That comes at a financial cost to the district. The second piece is the medical mobile clinic that would be at the high schools, and that's the one that we'd be developing the MOU for. And so when you talk about possibility or liability of these services being provided, the district carries insurance. The Heritage Health carries insurance. And I think those two things would be clearly delineated based upon the services that are being provided. We're not providing those services for the child. We're providing access to those services. So the contract that exists between us and Heritage Health then is also governed by the individual insurances that are carried by the school district and by Heritage Health. And so, you know, at any given time, there's risk for, like I think you said, human behavior is a real possibility, and so all of us are required as entities to carry insurance to protect against that. Can we guarantee that nobody's ever going to make a bad decision? I don't think we can, but you can mitigate risk by making sure that we have clear expectations for how people are to perform in those roles, and then making sure that we're reviewing that relationship with Heritage Health or whomever at least annually.
Yeah, and Dr. Cook, I think the RFP was really well done, and I think 3.1, you talk about risk, it talks about minimum provider qualifications, and it lays out what we were looking for, and it specifies, mental health services, particularly K through 8, and so I think we were really clear or the district was very clear in the RFP, and so I think our negligence would be if we had selected a provider that wasn't qualified to provide these services, but we followed process, and I thank Jeff for this RFP, or whomever did it, because I think it was really nicely done, and it does do that. It says, here to the community, we're looking for these services. Please apply for this contract. Here's what we're looking for. And we were very specific in what we wanted. So, thank you.
All right, I'm just talking about being, sufficiently licensed mental health therapists and all that kind of stuff. I'm just. I've said enough. Thank you.
We hear you.
Thank you. Huh?
Your concerns are.
I've been in the field. I know
Right.
what it's like. I've been on the front lines, and I know that sometimes these cases are really tough. And I just want to make sure that the therapist there on the grounds has got the support they need to make those kind of decisions in a crisis situation, which they're going to come across. It's going to happen. There are going to be some kids, and that if that's all I'm asking. Is that it's not be something like, well, you got a bad case here. We'll talk about it in a couple of days. Sometimes they need immediate action. And my assumption is that those professional relationships are in place, that the therapist would contact their colleague at Heritage or would contact the people or the people at the school. Okay.
Yes, and we maintain and must carry a duty to care. So if we recognize that a student's at risk, that we never lose that authority and or expectation that we carry professionally, is that we have to report it if we think that a kid is at risk to harm himself or others.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, as I said, I'm in support of it. I feel like those are questions we need to ask those kind of questions sometimes.
Anyone else have questions, comments, concerns? I have maybe two kind of concerns. One, I think it's just gotten a little confusing because we have the mobile health stuff and the mental health commingled here, and so I think it adds a layer of confusion. And I just want to make sure my understanding's right. Really, at this point, what we're talking about is continuing what we've been doing in the elementary schools, and we're expanding the use of the mobile health clinic. And for at least now, that's it.
That is correct.
And then in the future, adding a layer of additional mental health supports, but that may be at a cost, like it's currently at a cost at the elementary schools that have it.
That is correct.
So I have two comments. One, I'm disappointed we're not expanding mental health services at high schools and secondary schools now, because I think that's needed. And so I'm disappointed that we weren't able to do that. I think my other just concern is, and I know it's addressed in your summary, but just the policy work for me on the mobile health clinic side, and the mental health. I think just parent consent, or at least parent acknowledgement or notification is an important part to me, because if this was my own child, I would want to know. And I know we have kind of a process in place there, but I'm disappointed that's not in policy. And I guess for me tonight to vote yes, the motion's got to be contingent on we have it in policy within 60 days. Or something to that effect.
Yeah,
if we don't have that policy, I'm a no.
I think that's a good thing to discuss. There's two conflicting issues here. The first one is these are great services that we need to provide for our kids, and school started, and so we want to get into that position where we can provide those services. The second one is that Idaho has a law that states any 14-year-old has access to health care as needed without necessarily communicating with parents. And so we're trying to navigate that, because that makes this a little bit difficult for us to control. And so the conversations that we've been in with potential partners to provide these services have been a little bit tricky. And so there's a difference between a 14-year-old going to a clinic and getting, or older, obviously 14 years or older, and getting health services provided to them at a clinic, and then another one where we're actually taking the clinic to a school on our property where a kid could come out from the school building to the clinic and get some kind of service. And I think that's part of why we're trying to navigate what that looks like. And so we're all in agreement that we've got to find a path forward so that consent makes sense. We're looking for an opt-in model, and we've talked about putting in language that would give parents the authority to say, essentially, my kid can access that clinic as needed necessarily, however that must go. Some parents will say, I'd rather be notified and want to talk with the nurse or someone prior to allowing my child to go out to this mobile health clinic. And so I think or absolutely, I don't ever want my kid, right, excuse me for forgetting that I don't ever want my kid going to the health clinic, period, right? And so that's where we're trying to thread the needle, if you will, and I think this is an absolutely fantastic service that we can provide for kids if it meets the needs and expectations of the parents. And so that's the next step, and we wouldn't be opposed to the idea of following this up with some policy work that provides that consent protection for threading the needle between what's legally capable in the state of Idaho and what's our obligatory supervision expectation for how this would manifest on school property.
I'm confused, not on that, but on Chair Morris's comment. So is phase one, because in the motion it says that phase one agreement between Heritage Health will include the continuation of medical services through the use of a mobile medical unit 6 to 12 hours per week at each high school. So you said that's not happening.
No, that is happening.
So okay.
That's
That is
essentially what's
but
being
that's new.
approved is mobile health clinic had only been at Venture. It's now being expanded to Coeur d'Alene High and Lake City High School.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you had said it was not expanding to our high schools. It is expanding, right? Okay.
But no mental health. That's medical. That mobile health clinic is medical service.
And may I
It's
ask
not mental health services.
a consensus question on that?
Confused now more.
Do I understand the consensus of the board is if we can expand mental health services at the high school, assuming this is approved by the board, that as soon as we could expand this, that would be well received by the board?
Absolutely, in my opinion.
But can we come back to the medical services? Because, Nicole, you can help us with this. If a student goes to the bus and they're suicidal, even though, quote unquote, we're not offering mental health services through a social worker or a mental health professional, the provider on duty would channel that student to the right location. We're not going to not see a student that is having an acute mental crisis.
That is true. I mean, you're right. We're not going to refer them to someone else. And actually, the nurse practitioner who works on the mobile health clinic recently completed some additional certifications in adolescent mental health and can prescribe for mental health conditions. And so when we're talking about a healthcare provider visit versus a counseling or therapy session, that's what we're saying would not be available on the medical bus. However, any student in that moment of crisis would be helped, whether it's through Heritage Health medical bus or mental health services through Heritage Health or our systems in place for employees of the school district.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Is there a motion in here?
Yes, there was at the top.
Oh, no, there's not.
No? I thought it was at the.
First sentence on the summary page, or the first sentence of paragraph 6 on the page. We are recommending the expansion of.
So the motion would be the expansion of the mobile health clinic agreement. That's what you're talking about? Did you want me to continue reading the whole
If you want
paragraph?
a motion to approve,
Just the first
I'll make a
sentence.
motion to approve the expansion of the mobile health clinic agreement with Heritage Health to continue services to Venture High School and additionally to include our 2 other high schools.
Second.
okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? I have one, which is just, I'd ask that be amended that the policy work be completed within 60 days.
I think that's a good amendment.
Yes, sorry, I accept that.
Is that clear enough, Ms. Town? Okay. Any further discussion?
This one was a little confusing. I don't know in the future how we could make it. I don't know. I think it was Heritage Health, not our district, but I think it was confusing. So I feel guilty that maybe wasn't fully understanding it, or maybe it's just a really complex topic. But
We started working on this. I don't even want to say how long ago we started. We have been working on this since June of 2018, 19, because of the nature of the services, because of consent, because of the age of 14 in the state of Idaho, because of procurement issues and legal expectations of both parents and healthcare providers. I'll be honest, I wish we could have provided you a more clear and coherent example of this, but we felt like we needed to get this service in place, and we're actually quite happy that we can go back and work on getting the consent language and bring that to you in the next month or two.
And if you'll clarify with Heritage Health about their sliding scale fee and so we can correctly answer questions from community members, that would be helpful.
Okay, so we have a motion amended. It's been moved and seconded. I don't need to have that done again, right? I just need to take a vote. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, everyone. That was a lot.
Thank you, guys. That's a big deal for our kids.
Way to just come in and slow down the meeting, Dr. Cook. Okay. So now we're jumping back to information stuff here, and we are on to item H, which is a district work plan update.
So I'm going to ask my peeps in the booth if they could pull up the latest version of the Portrait of a Graduate. We are very excited to present to you the first draft version of that we're ready to take out to the community as early as next week, right? We're going out on Monday. And to show community members, if you remember, we did, this goes back even to, I'm not going to say the name of these right, Data Summit conversations from 2 years ago, and collecting information on what people wanted for what the community wanted for the graduates. And we have since then taken feedback from lots and lots of stakeholders and community members. And our latest version, if you recall, was the workshop that we all participated in a couple of weeks ago. We've taken your feedback and we've embedded that into this document. And we're going to take this on the road now and just keep getting more input and feedback. Our first session is next Monday at noon, right? Next Monday at noon at here? I think it's here, right? And we're going to invite everybody that participated in any of the first sets of community meetings, and we'll include other groups that have been along with this for this ride with us. So LRPC will be invited, and our Spark group is going to be invited to see that feedback. They've been for part of this conversation. And so we're going to have 3 separate presentations in the community about this to gather more input and feedback and just see what it is that people are starting to see and what this means for the community. And so we wanted to present this to you tonight and give you a chance to ask us any questions about next steps. Eventually, this will become the tool that drives so many of our decisions in the classroom, and what we anticipate will be how we define what it is that we want for every one of our kids that they come through and participate wherever they go to school, whatever middle school they go to, whatever high school they go to, and eventually, once they graduate, what those expectations would look like. And assuming once this is accepted as the Portrait of a Graduate and passed by you all, this will also become a driver in the high school schedule work that Dr. Cottle will be facilitating with the high schools on how do we develop the most appropriate schedule, similar across and equitable across all of our high schools, that will provide access to each of these things that are listed on this Portrait of a Graduate. So we would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions on this? We spent several hours a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, discussing this document. So questions, comments?
I just want to say thank you first to those that put this together and all the hard work. I know that the cabinet and some specific members of the cabinet spent a lot of time and sweat, blood, maybe, and tears. So thank you. My only thought when I went through this was the one word that kept going through my mind as I was looking at those in the workshop was accountability. And I'm trying to find it in there somewhere, and maybe I'm missing it. And so that was the only piece that as we talk about these definitions a little bit more, maybe it's embedded in there and I'm just not seeing it. I really tried to find it, and because I know you guys really took everybody's feedback to heart, but that's my one comment.
Oh, she wants to take that on.
One of the things we tried to do is to try to sort of mesh we had all those pictures of all of our thinking, and we tried to mesh many of those ideas together. And we may have misinterpreted or maybe misinterpreted the understanding of the conversation about accountability. And our thinking was that as we kind of dive down into that, what that meant for kids, we felt like we were talking about diligence and responsibility. And so we tried to be careful to make sure that those were there, that responsibility and diligence showed up several times with regard to financial understanding and with regard to being a strong community member. And we know this is iteration number 17, and there's probably another 15 more to go. So I'm happy, and I think we all are, to come back to that notion of accountability. I'll let our fearless leader talk about that. But
We had a long discussion about accountability and whether it is it a personal accountability that a kid is held to, and is that separate than diligence and personal responsibility and work ethic? Or is it that there's an umbrella of accountability for us to provide all of this for a kid, and the kid has an accountability to us as give their best efforts in developing that? And so that was a difficult delineation. Or is it an external source looking at this and saying the system is accountable to the community for producing somebody that can go out and highly compete for the best colleges, the best jobs, the best opportunities and trades and career and tech ed. And so accountability as a term sent us all over the place. But there's more opportunity to have that discussion for sure.
I have one question. I just was looking in terms of specificity, and what I'm speaking of specifically is under recommendation under 1 equity. It's one of the competencies is for.
Tom, are you on the work plan?
Yeah, the draft, yes. Yeah, district work plan.
Yeah, I'm on the draft.
Yep.
Okay.
Draft work plan.
Page 1, and it says. Teachers and leaders will have an operational understanding of how to develop classrooms, discipline approaches, and school communities that address the heart, body, and mind. Okay. Then I looked across to the action steps and was trying to figure out what's the action step that corresponds to that. It seems a little vague to me, frankly. It just seemed. I understand what I. What would be the action step for that, or is there one?
So the framing of the portrait of the graduate is kind of the driving force on what we expect to be as the all kids should expect this as far as knowledge, skills, and disposition. So that kind of is the expectation that will drive the mind part of this. The heart and body is coming through, we're building and I don't know what it's titled, but it's going to be essentially this It's a mental health framework that will include how we're going to build a social emotional learning base for all kids so that they feel connected to the community that's developed in the classroom. And so we're not there yet, but that's the action steps that are going to build heart, mind, and bodies as this complete child. And it's one of the reasons, if you scroll up, that we just changed the name. This is commonly spoken of across the nation as called Portrait of a Graduate. We felt like it was important for us to say Portrait of a Complete Graduate because one of the things that we want to talk about is educating the whole child, which means, and the whole child is the definition of heart, body, and mind, and what are those expectations that will play out. Much of that will start to come out once we start to transfer the work plan into a strategic plan. That's when you'll start to see that becoming much more detailed and specific.
Okay. My concern sometimes those statements are kind of vague, you know, and so it's kind of people, you know, what do you mean by that? What are you going to, how are you going to do that?
We could, do you guys want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we've been doing with heart, mind, and body, or is it too soon?
I'm not saying they're bad things. I just thought that was vague when I read it. I thought
it is vague. It's intentionally vague because we haven't got it built out yet.
Huh?
Like being misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're getting off track there a little. You know, I think that's the work plan, right? That's going to develop into a strategic plan and action steps and all those sorts of things. And you're not there yet, right? I think where you're looking, Tom, if you scroll to the next page, because that section continues on, so it talks about district and school mental health plans. You know, that's an action step to create those district and school mental health plans, create a system of annual updates for all plans to the board. I mean, you're starting to see, you know, little action steps there, right? But those are even real broad. Those are going to have to be expanded to what's that really mean?
Right.
Right. And that's the work that you all get to do.
Right. And some of this is, okay, so we've got the work plan up. Some of this, so the portrait of the graduate, of the complete graduate, think of a little bit as here's the outcome, here's the expectation. It's pretty broad and it's pretty, it stays at a pretty high level because what we're aspiring to is something for 11,000 students, right? Every kid that comes through, we want the same thing for 11,000 students. And that that is if a kid's going to become a plumber or if a kid wants to go study audiology, doesn't matter, whatever. And so we want that for all things. So we have to write it broadly. The work plan is, and I think it was Scott Mabin that said this. When it finally clicked with him and he's like, okay, this makes perfect sense. The product we're developing is the complete graduate. The code, like the way you would write code for a web page, is the work plan. That's all of the stuff that we're going to do behind the scenes that help us produce these graduates. And so that's why this is a 5 to 10 year plan. Everything on that work plan, as we develop that into a strategic plan, is a little bit of behind the scenes, creating conditions in classrooms and competencies in the people that are delivering that give them all the things they need so that the product they produce when a kid comes out after 13 years is that. So if you're asking what are some of the specific ways we're getting there, we can tell you a little bit, but it is pretty broad right now because we haven't developed that out. And in 5 years, that strategic plan will be in place.
So this isn't our forward-facing document. That's
right.
Yeah, I think that helped me click. I think how you put it into the code. That I can see how this works now. This is not a strategic plan. Is our forward-facing.
Right.
And in addition to the.
Right. We've got to get that work plan. That work plan gives us what we need as a framework to go back and start building. You know, I think it says in there something like a mental health or social emotional learning framework. Like that document will be 30 or 40 pages. It says we have to build a curricular management plan and an assessment management plan. And those documents will be 50, 60 pages, right? Like it's not going into great detail until we get to the specific thing is what is that going to look like?
And we have to give you a hard time since you missed the beginning of the meeting. You said 5 to 10 year work plan. We got that 3 to 5 year work plan.
3 to 5 year plan. 3 to 5, guys.
I guess what prompted my question was I just think that if we're heading toward a strategic plan, the simpler and clearer we can be with a minimal amount of edu-speak in it, I think the better off we are.
So one of the problems you'll run into is the work plan will be the exact opposite of EduSpeak. It will be loaded with EduSpeak because that's the language of our code, right? Like that's what educators talk. And so when this thing becomes forward-facing, becomes we're in essence going to produce an 8-page document. And 8 pages is relative. Who knows how big it is? But the idea is that a layman can consume it and understand what it is that we're driving towards. Layperson, excuse me.
One, going back to Portrait of a Complete Graduate, at the top there, the each graduate of Coeur d'Alene will statement. I know we kind of massaged that around, I think, when we all met a week or so ago. And I thought that the end of it there of their choice, I thought we got rid of that.
Did we?
I thought we did. Because it's not their choice, right? These are minors. There's some parent involvement in there, and that I thought we talked about it and to pursue their future, or something along that line.
I own that one.
I think my only comment is it looks great, and I'm excited for the community to see it and hear the feedback you get. I'm with Jen. I would like to see some personal accountability, and however you guys want to wordsmith it and wherever you want to put it, maybe it's under resilient or communicator or confident learner, but we hear from the community all the time about personal accountability. Our students have to be accountable. So I agree with you that you guys incorporated that in certain areas, but accountability, personal accountability is personal accountability.
And I'm fine with it just saying personal accountability. I mean, it's pretty much self-explanatory, hopefully. Sorry, I don't have my microphone on, but I have that as well on here in a big box from our meeting.
So those two.
So can we come listen in on to hear? I missed the first session when you guys brought it out to the community, but I'm kind of curious to hear. So can we sit in on that session next week?
Yeah, there's 3 sessions. We're doing one next week on Monday from noon to 1. We're doing one Wednesday from, somebody look them up.
Maybe Lynn can just send us a little note.
Yeah.
If we're going to go, we'll let Lynn know that.
Tuesday, 8:30, 9:30.
We'll send you the dates.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'd love to have you guys there.
And so just so we're all clear, you're going to have these listening sessions. It's going to be out in the community for a while, a few months. Then it's going to come back to us eventually for approval?
Yeah, the next steps will be to get that kind of dialed in, get that feedback, and then take the work plan and send it 2 different directions. One direction is to go, all right, let's synthesize this into something that's consumable and that provides the feedback and detail that we need to align with the Portrait of a Complete Graduate. And then the other side of that is to go start digging into timelines and who to assign it to and what do those products look like, so that when you get it all the way down to action steps, we can start working on and creating that. So it gets even more EduSpeak heavy, the work plan will. It'll become even more and more jargon filled, but we'll take the other direction and build out the strategic plan will be a document that we will want to face out to the system so that the system can see clearly what it is that we're producing. And that will be eventually what will happen is the strategic plan and the Portrait of a Complete Graduate will come before you guys for your approval. We would love to have that in place probably sometime in, let's just say January, February, March, depending on how all the feedback goes. And then we continue to build the work plan, and it'll sit behind those 2 documents, and we will report out to you very regularly on how that work plan is pushing this forward. So if the goal is 3 to 5 years, then we can get there.
All under everything.
Okay. Are we good? We'll move on. We were just really good on time, Steve, and then you came in here. Now we're back on track. Okay, so let's keep it moving. Item I here is our secondary enrollment projections.
We're going to talk to you about middle school enrollment and give you some feedback on where things are. Now we've now completed 5 days of school, and so we have some pretty decent data to share with you and kind of some things that we've been tracking. So I'm going to turn this over to Katie Ebner, Jeff Voller, and Dr. Cottle.
Good evening, Dr. Cook, Chair Morrisroe, and trustees. We wanted to do what Kate Keinert did and bring middle schoolers with us this evening, but we probably would overflow this room and wouldn't have them all here. So, I'll move this. So there's 4 items that we would like to chat with you a little bit about tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about enrollment at the middle level, look at capacity of our buildings as well as lockers, because as you know at the middle level, kids are really excited about their lockers and it's a point of stress for them. We're going to look at some enrollment projections, knowing that we still have some work to do to get deeper into our projections, and then we'll talk a little bit about financial impact and facilities impact. So this is a similar chart. Well, it's a little bit different. I took the information that was in your packet and I tried to combine it into one chart. The information on this chart is enrollment taken from September 3rd, knowing that you saw different numbers on Friday as well in your packet, and our numbers are constantly changing. For example, we had 2 students enroll at Woodland today, and those 2 young ladies will be sharing lockers. So as you can see, we broke down the numbers from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We compared our total from 2019 and 2018, and we're up at all 3 middle schools. Canfield is up 16 students, Lakes is up 41, and Woodland is up 57. The target capacity there, similar to elementary, we kind of look at what's the ideal class size. We don't really put caps on middle level. At the secondary, it's a little bit easier. We have more teachers. We have more flexibility within the schedule. Teachers can teach multiple subjects. And so, we would prefer in a perfect world to have 26 students per class, but we know that we can handle more. So class sizes are usually more around 30. We are experiencing at Canfield and Woodland class sizes between 33 and 35. The big stressor right now at Woodland is specifically in the electives for 7th and 8th graders. And then we put our locker count there. If every student was to have a locker on this given day, we would be short lockers at Canfield and Woodland, and then Lakes right now is set pretty good for lockers. And please stop me. I'm just going to go through a couple slides, and if you have any questions, just interrupt me. We thought it would be interesting to look at transition because there are a lot of opportunities for students in the Coeur d'Alene area to attend different types of schools. It doesn't have to be schools in our district. There are several charter schools and private schools. And then we also lose students to different reasons, moving, attrition, things like that. So we thought it would be helpful to share with you some of those numbers. So if you look up here, the first column is the year, and what we did is we took the number of 5th graders when they left us, and those numbers were from the last day of school. So for example, 2019, we had 935 5th graders in our school registered the last day of school. Then this fall, this is the information taken on Friday, which would have been the 6th, we had 824 middle school students. So you can see from spring to fall, we lost 111 students. And we went back 5 years, so you can see the trend. We used to have 6th grade offered at Sorensen, but with the increase in elementary numbers, we shifted the Sorensen 6th grade teacher to Lakes Middle School. So if you took the average, it's interesting. Some years it's a little less, some years it's a little more. We lose about 112.4 students. Some of this is because of charter. We have quite a few students that leave from 5th grade to 6th grade, go to charter. Sometimes charter offers 2 sections, sometimes 3. We also have students that choice out into other schools. We have not done a very good job at tracking exactly where students are going. So right now we're working with technology and Skyward to better track. We want to see where kids are leaving, and then we also know that we have some kids that return to us in 8th grade, and we want to know where they're coming from.
Just
yes, they find their choices weren't what they thought they would be, and they come back.
Sorry, typically, I believe like 20 or so students for Woodland. I'm not sure about Canfield or Lakes, but.
It'd be interesting to see how many of these kids come back in 9th grade too. I bet it's 100.
Oh, a lot.
Yeah. Maybe not quite 100, but I bet close.
Yeah, it would be interesting because we do have a lot of students come back just their freshman year. Sometimes they're homeschooled students, and it's because they get to a point where the parent, would like extra electives and things like that. So we definitely need to do a better job to see where our kids are coming and where they're going, and that way we can improve our programs and have better information.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this work and putting that in there. That was just one thing that stood out to me on what I would call the next slide in our document, that just talks about what could middle school look like next year and the following year. And just a note I put there is, I was concerned that we didn't have kind of the impact of charter in those projections, because all of a sudden you start taking out 112.4 kids. That makes those projections much different than what they were. Thank you for getting that in there, and I agree. If we could look at, we know at the end of charter's first trimester that we get some kids back, and we know at 7th grade we get some kids back, and I'd love to see us do what you did there. Look at a couple years of trend data and just see what's that look like in 9th grade and those sorts of things.
So one of the things, it actually goes back a little farther, but we wanted to start getting really dialed in and tracking where our kids were. And so we started that actually by simplifying the ways that kids are coded when they leave at any age in Skyward, so that there's not so many options for how they're coded, because ultimately what you've got to do is pull the data and then run a report. And so one of the things that we did as a follow-up was recognize we didn't necessarily have a great way of tracking the kids that are going to charter. So I actually called Dan Nicolay, principal at Charter Academy, and said, is there a way for us to figure out and get on the same page with how many kids you guys are going to take, so we can, they're just even like staffing and HR. If we know those solutions in March, April, May, that's a big difference than trying to hire somebody in August. And if you just look at the map, can you imagine if 112 more kids were in Woodland, Canfield, and Lakes right now? We'd be struggling with that. And so the agreement we kind of settled on was that they'd let us know the number of kids that they've accepted at each of our elementary schools as a point of tracking. So we would start to be able to get more dialed in on that data so that we can start to see some of that trend data. And I don't know that we've done that in the past. So I'm very grateful to them for being able to share that with us. And I think as we get kids, we start to get that figured out. This isn't I'll say this, I don't mind saying this at all. I think it's an opportunity for us to partner, right? Like, this is the community's kids, whether they're at charter and they stay, or they start with us, finish with us, come back, whatever, that's the community's children. And we have an obligation to provide them the best education, whatever it is. And so if we can find ways to make that more effective, then I'm all for that.
And I would agree. We do survey parents at the 5th grade level on their intentions on what schools they would like to go to, and it's been kind of frustrating in the past not to be able to dial in those charter numbers. And so I think the work that Dr. Cook's doing, as well as what our technology department is doing in providing an easier way to code, so that way we can track and figure out where kids are going and where they're coming from. This one's kind of interesting. Everything in the black font is kind of the perfect world. I don't know if it would be a perfect world. I think we'd be in trouble. But if students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade did not leave our system, this is what the future would look like. So what we did is we used the enrollment numbers in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade from September 3rd. And so 3rd grade, we have 877 students. 4th grade's 898, and 5th grade is a really large group with 937. And so it shows you what this fall would look like. And what fall 2020 would look like if all of those students stayed in our system. If we didn't gain any students from anywhere else, and if we didn't lose any. So we would be up another 118 students. We would be at 2,606. The blue numbers take in the attrition rate. So we talked about in that last slide, we lose about 112. I just used the number 112 students. So that sixth grade class in fall 2020, if we lost 112 students, we'd have 825 students. So that would bring our total down more to 2,494. So it'd only really be a gain of 6. And then each year you can see where I added the new sixth grade number in. So in 2021, that's the fourth grade class. And so you would see if they stayed, and then in blue is if we lost that 112 again. And then you would see fall 2020, where that smaller third grade class comes in. So it really shows, if you look at the variance in those numbers, how important it is that we really dial it in and try to get better information and data on where students are going and if they'll be staying in our system or not. We also plan to take advantage of flow analytics and some of the information they'll be providing us to help us, better predict. Because again, it's easier to plan for students in the spring when we are building our budget, when we're setting our staffing, and it's a lot harder to do it the first week of school.
I will say when Olivia Metz presented long-range planning last year, I think she identified this cohort. She said, this is a blip. We need to dial into this. So I'll be curious when Flo looks at it again, if they can figure out why we had such a large number for these several years and really looking forward. Because, does it justify an additional middle school? Because you need a big number for that, or it's a hard place to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, and this also doesn't take into consideration if we have any new families move in. This is just if status quo. So there's a lot of dynamics. Doesn't take into any growth, which we know is happening.
At a pretty predictable rate, too. So one of the things that we're going to start tracking, we haven't done yet, is to try to figure out what kids are in what schools for what period of time, which is a measure of mobility. Because the enrollment may stay at 500 kids at an elementary school, but it may be that it's not the same 500 that started. And so some of that will impact what you see on those slides, right? And if we're predictably growing about right now it's between 1.5 and 2% annually, then you can start to see what the long-term effects of that would be over time.
Could you just go back one slide real quick? I think the math on that was in the wrong column. I think it should have been in the wrong row. It should have been in the growth row. Because really that second year, well, I guess it depends how you do it. Where you did cumulative, you got to subtract out 112 twice, not once, because they left in 2020 and then 112 more left in 21. So we actually shrink, I think.
I think you may be right. We looked at it. I had several people look at this, and we were kind of arguing over it because it was almost like we took them out more than once. But I think,
Well, but if you're losing 112 in the fall of 20, then you lose 112 more in the fall of 21 and 112 more theoretically. And I know some come back at 7th grade, right? And we're not capturing all that here, but I think.
but if you compare your blue numbers, when you go from fall 2020 at 2494 to 2557, yes, I guess it's still a growth of 63. I think we'll have to go back and rework them because we had 2 people look at this and we were trying to debate if we did them correctly.
Your blue number.
You're right. It's a growth of 63 compared to. No, because your blue number 820. Let's say if you look at fall 2020, you're going from 812 kids in the 6th grade, and now you're saying there's 937 in the 7th grade. Those are the same kids, right? So really, it should have been 8. If you're capturing the charter kids, we're only 825 are coming. We're not getting 112 back
Right. So what I did is I didn't cumulatively take out the 112 each year, and I probably should have. Instead of, I just pulled it from the 6th grade. And so that's what the blue numbers represent.
Right. I think
Where it would
you'd
be
wanna look at it
probably,
both ways,
yeah,
right?
which would probably go down more.
You would want to add some back in though in that scenario, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just really shows you that we really need to kind of dial in our process and tracking kids a lot better.
Okay, I'm going to talk about a financial impact. Just looking at the original data, we were looking at roll-up numbers, and at the time when we were looking at the data, we were talking about putting the impact for charter in, but then we looked at a year, and looking back at that slide, the data may have been incorrect, but taking into consideration growth would also maybe net against some of that loss to charter. So we looked at a financial impact as the doom and gloom, like what's the worst case scenario, because y'all know I like to be conservative on some things. So what I looked at, well, we earn on 18.5 secondary students, so that'd be 7th and 8th graders, 1 unit, and then 23 6th graders would earn us 1 unit. I took a very conservative estimate for attendance. I think I may have even put it down to 90% because I wanted to also take into consideration, we weren't putting the loss to charter in there. And so in the first year, we would potentially earn an additional 5 units. And now this is making a pretty big assumption I put at the bottom, is that all other units in the school district are constant. And so you can't really say that, but we're just looking at it for isolating this one bubble of growth. So the first year, we would earn a potential 5 units. The second year, an additional 3 units on top of those 5 units. And then the third year, an additional 2 units on that. So this is built off of just the sheer roll-up numbers, not assuming any loss to charter. So if you're trying to reconcile out to that, that doesn't take that into consideration. So the worst case scenario, all the students, the roll-up students, the additional, 224, would it be enough to fund? Would this additional unit revenue be enough to fund? And the answer is likely no, because our sections are maxed out at this point. So if we wanted to get closer to the target, we would want to add more into our operations. So, and then we all know that the state formula doesn't fund everything we do. In our current levy, the more students you add to our enrollment, the more that our levy, because it's a fixed amount, is stretched. And so that raise that we've given on the base of our staff members, as we're adding staff members, that gap is now wider between what the state is going to cover. So this is, $275,000 would, if we were able to set that aside to address the growth and the growth was materialized, that would be the best case scenario. Any questions on those slides? We'll move on.
Okay, so I took a look at the facilities impact, and again, just kind of using that straight roll-up data, and some of what I'm going to talk about has been embedded in the presentation a little bit so far, so I can just kind of summarize it. But, Trina talked about our target being 26 students per class. Currently, we're at 33 to 35 students per class, so our classrooms are crowded. So if we're just looking at the data of 224 additional middle schools in 3 years, that would equal 9 new classrooms. So where do those classrooms go? We currently don't have any classrooms available at the middle school level right now. So we would need new classrooms. So what does that mean? And that also doesn't factor in classrooms that we would like to have just to reduce sheer class size. And then I also think it's important to take a look at what are the impacts just around the school. So think about how our schools were built when they were built for a smaller number. So lockers being one, and we touched on that especially at Woodland and Canfield, we're short on lockers today. In fact, Nick sent me an email this afternoon. So when do I get my new lockers? So cafeteria capacity, we have to really think about that. The impact of the cafeteria. Does that mean We're crowding lunches. We're rotating a third lunch into that and trying to fit that into the schedule. There's a lot of impact that happens in that. The middle school principals have said, hey guys, think about what happens in our halls during the passing periods. I mean, if you go to any one of those schools and you just stand there during the passing period, it's crowded. There's a lot of kids moving through to get in between classes. And so, and then consider pickup and drop-offs for parents, and then additional staff necessary to factor additional students in additional classes. So what does that look like? Does that mean additional portables? Does that mean additions to buildings? I think based off these factors, that makes it really tight and really, really tough for us to consider those. There's probably short-term solutions we need to look at. There's long-term solutions that we need to look at, and there's probably even longer-term solutions that we need to look at ultimately. So, so any questions you guys have for us on that presentation?
Seeing your last comment there about portables versus additions, it struck me. Do we know if Flow Analytics is going to look at the idea of additions and space available at schools in the alternative to new schools or in conjunction with?
Yes, in some regard. They're going to tell us essentially what they believe to be are the projections as they would map out over time. And they feel pretty confident about 5 years. They get less confident about 10 years. And so then the question becomes a competition between three separate things. And that is, what are your projections telling you? What are the facility options you have? And what are the land acquisition possibilities you have? And some of our schools could be expanded, and some of them can't really. And so that will be how all that gets synthesized into, here's where your best, if we have money in pocket, we can go buy this land and build this new school. If we can't find land, then maybe one of the options would be, then you might want to consider expanding some of the schools. And we've talked about that a little bit. There's getting the projection data dialed in more tightly so that we really know what it is that's coming long term. One of the things that we've already talked about since we can see this kind of 5-year impact of kids going to charter, next step is, all right, during that same 5 years, how many of those kids are coming back? And you can't go back and count them, but you can start to track what's the outgoing class of 6th grade look like when they come in as 7th graders, and you can see if there is a slight change, or 8th graders, or especially 9th graders when they can start coming back to high school. The more we can get dialed in on that, the better, the more accurate those decisions can be for a 5-year or a 10-year decision. And so yes, when they have that conversation with us, the goal is to have as exact data as we can give them, so that will help.
And Flow has asked us for a pretty extensive list of data. So considering portables, with portables, without portables, what do we currently have, and what are our goals with that? So, they're going to have a lot of information to sort through.
And even just what is capacity that's a moving target. Defining capacity of a school is a moving target, and they've settled on with the early request of data from us that they say at 95% of typical use is considered a full school. Well, even that could be, a full high school could have a teacher in every classroom, but you can still put more teachers in, right? Because you can put them on carts and they teach in other teachers' classrooms. And we've been in those situations, right? That's happened many, many times.
How does Flow feel about, you said they're okay with 5 years, 10 years, they get a little queasy about. So what about how big are we ever going to be discussion? How do they feel about, projecting, okay, you could only be, because it's a big difference if the biggest we're ever going to be is 15,000, or hey, you could be 20 or 25,000 students. And,
Yeah.
I mean, forever's a long time, right?
Right.
But, that's, to me, that's really drives that long range plan, right?
Right.
Because at some point, and we've had this discussion lots of times, are we ever going to be big enough that we really need 3 comprehensive high schools?
Exactly. And we've given them those questions. And the thing that they've said early on, without even looking at this, is that the benefit of being able to try to speculate the answer to that question is we're kind of landlocked, right? There's not a lot out there that is going to continue to be built out unless we change our boundaries. And so then the variable is how much of this becomes high density infill after you have no more land to build out for subdivision type housing, and then you start to bring in things like multi-use or multi-unit apartments and complexes in, and that's impactful as well. And so I'm stealing a little bit of Jeff's thunder, so I don't want to go too far down that. But he and I we talk about that much more than I'm proud to admit. Any other questions?
Okay. Other questions on the secondary enrollment? All right. Mr. Voller, let's move on here to item J, which is facility updates.
All right, and we really kind of ultimately transitioned to some of that just kind of naturally in our discussion. So I'm actually going to start with talking about flow analytics. So on Friday, we had a 2-hour kickoff meeting with them. That was our formal kickoff. And so our district team met with them in a conference room. We did a video conference to kind of meet their team and who's going to be working with us and what this process is going to look like and all the data that we need to continue to gather and get to them. And so a couple of highlights that came out of that, just what's really going to start happening here over the next couple of weeks. Our parent surveys are going to begin, and I had this week, but actually we have some new data as of late this afternoon that's going to start next week. But what that does mean is that's going to give Scott some time to start to message this to our district and our families so that they can be aware of what's coming out for these surveys, what it's going to look like. They're going to be an online chat survey initially, so we'll send some messaging out so that people know exactly what to be expecting, and hopefully this messaging will also help improve the results from that. And they have some metrics that will track who completes the survey, so that once you complete the survey, you will no longer be contacted. If you don't complete the survey, there'll be some additional messaging coming out to say, hey, please complete the survey. And we'll kind of track that through. So again, we're using a consulting company out of Spokane that's going to be doing this for us. Scott had a long conference call with them today too to just kind of talk about some of the details for that. But that's forthcoming in the next week to 2 weeks. And then Flo's going to be doing the enrollment assessments and also the land use analysis over the next couple of weeks. So that's what's coming here initially. I put this packet on your table this slide because it's a really hard one to read up here, but it is an important one because it talks us through kind of really what this process is going to look like. So a lot of it's going to be behind the scenes over the next couple of months, really, because you're going to start to see they're going to be using our data. They're going to be doing enrollment forecasts. They're going to be doing the community surveys. And ultimately what they're putting together for us is what they call their springboard proposal. And so essentially what they're doing is they're giving us their first recommendation for what our boundaries should look like. And they said, we've never done a springboard proposal, and that's where we come away, and we're just done right there. So really it's a proposal to get us started, to take us into the committee work that is going to go through this so the committee can start to tear that springboard proposal apart and look at, what are the questions that we think the community will have, what are challenges we see with that as a district, as our families, and so the committee will be working through that. And so as you're looking at this, that committee work really doesn't start until that first meeting of December 3rd. So, from now for the next 2.5 months, we're really going to be working on a lot of behind the scenes stuff, a lot of data that Flo is going to be processing to get us to that point where we can engage our committee and start to move forward. So the committee then is going to meet 4 times before we even get to community open houses. So they're going to take this springboard proposal and just kind of tear it apart and look at different iterations of it. And one of the things Flo says that really sets them apart, and I think we saw this in their proposal as well, is that they have the capability of doing real-time scenarios. And so if the committee says, hey, what if we try to move this boundary here? What does that do? And what's the impact? And they can pull it up and look at it and kind of make different iterations of it, and we can just kind of process through different ideas and options as we move forward with this. So the committee work will start to happen in December, and then the committee work will be pretty heavy December, January, February, with a break in there for Christmas, and that gets us ultimately to the board recommendation of March. And we were going to talk a little bit specifically about the committee. And so I was going to pass it back to Dr. Cook to talk a little bit about the committee work with that.
Can I ask a question real quick
Yeah,
before
please.
we do that? On those meetings, will Flo be in attendance?
Yes.
Physically there?
Yes.
Okay.
So when on, what was it, the 6th, Jeff? Is that when we met with them
Yes,
on September
Friday
6th?
Yep.
So we learned a lot about their expectations of a committee when we talked with them. And so now the question is, how do we collectively want to define the committee that's going to be serving on behalf of the district? They'll have, gosh, what was it, a total of, I think, 6 or 7 meetings with Flo. And so there's really 3 options. And so what we're going to do right now is just talk about what you guys might want, and I would look for some direction from you all on how you want this to go. There's really 3 options that we have. The first is, and it kind of depends on the answer to this question. First of all, do you want this, do you want the committee to be making recommendations directly to you? Because if that's the case, then there are specific sets of guidelines and kind of parameters in which that needs to happen. If you want the recommendations of the committee to come to administration and then administration makes the recommendations to you, then that gives us a completely different set of guidelines. And so that's the first question I want you to consider. And ultimately, we have 3 options. The first option is we say that we just are going to assign this to Long Range Planning Committee, which is already a board-appointed ad hoc committee that has a large and robust membership of constituents, both people that work in the district, for the district, and community members outside of the district, in which they would then report out to you and produce a recommendation to the board. The second option is to develop a completely separate from that ad hoc committee with the sole purpose of giving guidance and direction to the board on what next steps would look like with regards to any recommendations that would come out for boundaries. And the third option is that administration creates a working committee that would be made up of groups of folks that we would have from the community, from the staff, a mix of that, and then they make a recommendation to staff, which then turns around and makes a recommendation to the board. Now, that would, if you chose that one, they could still report to the board, but the recommendation formally comes from administration. And so some of this the discussion and the guidance I think we're looking for is, and would take your guys' direction or consensus on how you want this to go is, ultimately the board makes the decision. Does the board want to make the decision of the committee sending information to you all? Because that gives us that sets up the parameters for how the committee functions. Or do you want it to come so that it's an administrative committee and we build that committee similarly where we gather folks from the community and gather folks from staff to make that committee and then do those 7 meetings with that group and then report out to you all?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I was under the impression that the committee was just working in tandem with Flo to gather community input. So is it the committee that's making the recommendation on the change in attendance zoning, or is it Flo Analytics that's making the recommendation? So maybe that's where I'm confused, because we're talking about a recommendation, but I didn't think this committee would be coming up with the recommendation. I thought it would be Flo's recommendation.
It is a consensus model in which all of the conversation is being done in very public venues so that there's a lot of opportunity for buy-in discussion with 2 community meetings in which that can be shared as publicly as we want them to. So the committee has some pretty significant authority. I don't know that you can say, is it Flo's recommendation? Is it the committee's recommendation? If you guys establish that you want if for example, you choose that you want the Long Range Planning Committee to be the committee of that serves in this capacity, then there will be a point in which that committee, Long Range Planning, will present to you their recommendations. All of that will be based in what Flo has given them as far as experience.
I guess that's I never thought about that way.
shocking and super disappointing to me, because that's I thought the whole point of hiring Flo was so we didn't have that emotional fight that we've had every time we've done this. And there's going to be winners and losers. So I'm shocked, I guess, because that's never been my understanding of the process.
And I think
that there was going to be a local committee. So I don't know that I have an answer for you. I guess to me it's not long-range planning, because I think that just ruins long-range planning. I said that before. I think they would just get bogged down with that. You're talking 7 more meetings. So.
Well, let's have some clarifying. I think there's more background, Dr. Cook, to this conversation. So we've been talking about this committee for a while, long-range planning. Jerry Anderson's been involved in that conversation. So I guess I'm a little confused as Chair Morso, because I believe that the recommendation would be coming from Flo based on the data they collected, and that whatever committee it was would be the conduit to the community to kind of get their input. But the ultimate recommendation would be a data-driven, fact-based presentation to the board. That being said, I think it was never the assumption that long-range planning would be the only people comprised on this committee, that it would be, if we went that route, it would be long-range planning and additional members that the district felt needed to be on that committee to provide complete representation in the community. And to your point, it would be a huge lift to long-range planning to attend 7 meetings. There has been interest by a subcommittee, and we can have a subcommittee through long-range planning. We can direct them to create a subcommittee. Jeff could add to that subcommittee, but that would be a board-directed committee. But I think I'm mostly concerned, and maybe that's what Casey's talking about, is I also did not at all anticipate that this committee would be making the ultimate recommendation, because I think if we go that route, then it's going to have to be a publicly selected committee with lots of input, and I don't know that we have time for that right now.
Well, and I think that what that brings us back to is the working committee, which is this. They make that Flo and the committee partner and make a recommendation to the superintendent, who then makes the recommendation to the board based upon the feedback and information that they've gotten. That doesn't require the board appointment if we are going to go that direction.
I mean, I guess like I said, my understanding was just different than what this is.
Yeah.
Tonight's the first I've heard of a committee, so at least I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel
and maybe
like-
that's just because of long-range planning, you guys have been talking about it, but I guess I thought, and shame on me, but that Flo would come up with a number of scenarios, that we would have an open house, that the board would attend, we would hear from our constituents. We'd say, okay, let's do this instead of that. Or let's make this tweak as a board in that, I guess that's the way I thought it was going. So I'm just, like I said, I'm surprised.
I was under that same impression as well. I know we talked about community input and making that available for community members to attend, to hear what they have to present, just like Casey said, and Lisa. So I don't think will be very helpful on helping you decide about this, who's 7 meetings.
So remember, just kind of in this process, the springboard is ultimately a proposal that they're giving us, right? Like that's their first go around with a proposal that they're going to spend 2.5 months working to get us towards. Like they're going to come to us with maps and say, okay, here's what we propose. And then the committee is going to take a look at that and say, okay, let's look at that. But what if we tried this? What if we look at some different scenarios? What if we look at some different models? And that's where the Flo then will take their tools that they have and meet with our community that we've selected to say, okay, where are we going to go with this? And they're going to guide us through that process. And, ultimately this is designed to be data driven so that, now when we go into the first open house, there's going to be a whole other set of iteration maps of maybe even a couple different scenarios in there that we can look at in that first open house and get community input on. And then the committee's going to meet again and take a look at that with Flo, and they're going to be drawing maps, redoing all of this. So, Flo is ultimately critical in working through this process so that we get to that second open house that hopefully then there's consensus between committee, community, and Flo that we're going to bring as the board recommendation with that.
Is there any way we can dialogue with Flo to understand this process? Because I am is equally, I've heard a lot of different iterations of this, but I think what we're all concerned about is the passion that's going to be involved. And so maybe we're not clear on how Flo's process and what they view as community input and what they view as a committee, and maybe some examples of what they've done in the past, how they've selected this committee, and who ultimately will be making the recommendation. Me personally, I would like to have some recommendation come before the board in a public forum from Flo. I would like to hear what they have to say and have all their data presented for the community to see in this last final board recommendation, and whether it's coming via you and it's your ultimate recommendation, but I think we need to see them here presenting, and it's semantics who's recommending what, whether it's Dr. Cook or, but if it's coming from a committee, I think I have a lot of unease with that.
I agree with the consensus here. Is I guess I had envisioned it somewhat like the curricular audit, in that they would be doing a report to us, coming here, presenting to us, but the underlying pieces to that were going to be this committee. And I don't think my definition of the committee meets any of the three you outlined, because I had envisioned some portion of long range as a subcommittee being involved in that, and then including members of the cabinet, including members of the community that would be working with Flo as that committee with recommendations that, or just in general information and data. And that would be part of, after they did the springboard, that committee is then working off of that, which I think is kind of what Jeff's talking about. But I certainly didn't see it coming from a committee to us that is rooted here. I feel like the overall decision or the overall recommendation and what we decide shouldn't be coming from people nuclear within us, because that's what we hired them for, as an outside entity coming in and saying, this is what's best for your community based on all the input we got. It seems the inverse. It seems like we got all this input and now you give yourselves the recommendation, and that seems odd to me.
Okay.
We've got some time before that. I think we need to have just some more discussion and figure it out.
Could we dialogue with Flo through a workshop? I mean, you guys have a chance to meet them and talk to them. I would just kind of like to hear more now about their process, because maybe I'm not very clear on what their process entails. And I could use some more education, I guess, on that piece of it, and how they use the committee and why it's valuable. Can we do an hour workshop, like a lunch workshop, and they can webinar in, or are they going to be on site anytime in the near future, or they could give us a quick, it doesn't have to be long, but just an overall understanding more in depth of the process and what that recommendation looks like.
No, I think it's fine. I think part of what I've gotten consensus on so far is that we're definitely uncomfortable at this point trying to establish the role of the committee, because we're not sure what we want the committee to accomplish. They're very clear that they need a committee to interface with the community, right? You can't have this level of conversation with unlimited numbers of people. And so what we'll do is connect with them, and we'll establish that expectation and figure out what that next step looks like, and then provide an opportunity for them to maybe have a conversation with you all, and we'll get this figured out. But it's what is absolutely clear to me right now is that this idea of the role of the committee is a concern.
Yeah, and I'd like to reiterate, if we're going to use a committee in this fashion, it needs to be a board-directed committee, because I think that is the most transparent manner based on our current policy and procedure. If it's a superintendent-directed committee, we're not compelled by open meeting laws, and there's some things that change. I think that needs to be talked about, and in my opinion, this needs to be an open book process. If they want a committee, that's fine, but we still need an open book process.
Okay, we will dig in. We'll get some more information to you, and we'll find resolution to this, and we'll bring you back some more information.
Yeah, I think even in lieu of a meeting could just be more information, right? Yeah. Just maybe a little more background from either you folks and Flo about the process and what it'd look like, so we have greater understanding, and then we can see that and then kind of decide from there. If we need more information, do we need to sit down? That sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we're not done.
Right. Oh, well, we're done. I think we're done with that unless you guys have more questions about the flow. So I was just going to update you guys on a few things going on with the bond projects. So Lakes Middle School open on the first day of school. Glad to see kids in classes, and there was a nice press article that came out a couple days ago as well. But here I just brought you a couple pictures of kids using the new spaces. So this is kids in Mrs. Cunningham's new choir class, which virtually doubled in size for her, and she's really grown that program. These are kids, as we were walking around, they were out, I think this was the second or third day of school, in the courtyard doing some team building activities and icebreakers. It was kind of cool to see them working in that new courtyard space. Just a couple snapshots of the new hallway and then the library on the right. And that's our next focus of the library. Cabinetry's going in this week. So we hope probably by middle of next week we'll have full access to the library, and so that's the next thing to get cleared for us. And then they're going to move their efforts back to the gym and band room and get everything else ready on that backside of the project. Next up, Prairie Avenue is coming along, and right now it's a mess of rebar sitting out there. But actually, I was out there just this afternoon, just before I came here, and all that rebar is now in the ground. It's sitting in the holes, almost all of it. So they're currently building forms and getting ready for concrete to come in. And working on the civil side of things, so getting water lines in, getting dry wells in, getting sewer lines in, so all that really kind of unsexy stuff that just happens in the ground. And Gino's actually really pleased that stuff is going on right now, because sometimes on projects that stuff gets delayed or comes in really late in it, and so they're kind of scrambling to get some of that stuff tied into the building. So that from that standpoint, they feel like they're in a good spot to have a lot of that civil engineering going on right now with where we're at. So so we're moving along nicely with that project, and once we get the foundations in, that's when we'll really start to see things come out of the ground. As block work starts to go up on the gym, and you'll start to see steel structures come up, and that's when you can really see progress out there. But probably for the next month, it's going to be just you'll drive by and be like, oh, I don't see a lot of progress, but really there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and a lot of that dirt work and underground stuff that you just don't see from the roadside of it. So move along nicely. And with that, any questions you guys have? Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, do you want to mention the preschool at all?
It's on our list. That's why we asked.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, so the Lutheran Church of the Master, as you guys know, we signed the lease agreement with them a month ago, and so we frantically were getting ready for classes out there. And so, yes, that opened today, actually. School kicked off there. And last week, we actually opened Kinder Plus out there as well. So we have the developmental preschool, and we have Kinder Plus using that facility. So Kinder Plus uses it for the kids coming from either AM or PM kindergarten, and we can bus the kids there, drop them off, and so they'll either be in an AM program and then go to PM kindergarten, or vice versa for that. So that's Kinder Plus, and the developmental preschool is kicking off today. Their phonology program starts on Monday, and then they'll be running 2 half-day programs Tuesday through Friday out there for the developmental preschool kids. So we're excited to have that. They're excited to be in one spot for the developmental preschool. This is the first time that they've had their whole staff and their whole team together. They've got some office space, they've got classroom space. They're really excited to be together, and that kicks off this week, so they're excited.
Maybe we could hit up someone to give us a tour down the road. I'd love to see what they have going on there.
Okay, we can set that up.
Okay. And next up is item K, safety and security. Welcome back, Seth.
Thanks. Some of you might remember me. I'm Seth Denniston, Director of Technology. At the last meeting, I gave an award to Abe Wallin. It feels like the last meeting. I'm going to give a brief safety and security update. A couple of these items you might remember from the last time I presented. So real briefly, I'm going to go over a couple projects. We've got some introductions to make, some new folks that have joined our team this summer. And I'll also have Dean Keck, who's our safety and security coordinator, talk to you a little bit. But As far as summer projects go, a lot of these should look familiar. I mentioned some of these last time. We've been working hard to integrate some of our lockdown equipment. So this summer, some of our staff worked on integrating our phones with our door controller so that we could do a little bit more, and I'll talk about that in a second. We've also been adding blue emergency strobes to a lot of our buildings, and so John Pillmore, who's our new security tech, you'll meet in just a second, has been running feet and feet of wire to get that going. We've started at all of the secondary schools and are moving into the elementary schools now as well. And then a couple other.
What does that do?
Say that again.
What does it do? What does blue emergency strobes do?
So when a lockdown is triggered, it's a visual notification that a lockdown's happened. So we're putting those in areas that are large and sometimes hard to hear. So like lunchrooms, gyms, choir rooms, even outside on playgrounds. It also just starts strobing blue along with the lockdown tone. And so it's just another way for people to know that they need to get to a secure area. We've also been adding safety film to some of our school entrances. I talked a little bit about that last time as well. And then lastly, adding some cameras to especially the backside of portables where we had maybe some blind spots. So those have kind of been some focus areas. As far as future projects go, there's a long list of items, and I think we'd love to talk to you a little bit more about some of the things that we have planned for future projects as far as security goes. There's certainly no shortage of things to do. However, there's always a shortage of funding to make them happen. And so at some point, we might need some help prioritizing some of those things. But a few things that we have on the list right now, our cameras are pretty dated at this point. We've been replacing ones as they fail. I never like to do that in the technology realm. I like to be proactive and get things done ahead of time. So that's something that we'd definitely like to do moving forward. Same thing for door controllers. Bond funding is an amazing thing, but it's also one-time funding. And so many of our technology and security projects were done in 2013 with that bond. And so a lot of that stuff is going to start aging out. And then alarm panels. We've got alarm systems in every building, but many of them are still on dial-up. They're so old, and so we'd love to get those replaced so we can do some more as far as integrations there. We've talked to you a little bit about some vestibule remodels that we have on our list of projects. There's a few that we'd like to come back around and do up to the standard of some of our newer buildings. I think those are definitely high priority projects for us. And then access control for portables, I mentioned the last time I was presenting to you. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the coordination that we do with some of the local first responders. And so in Coeur d'Alene, we have an amazing relationship, whether it's fire or PD. We talk to them often. They've been great partners to us as a school district, and there's definitely a lot of things that we're doing that I think really help to make our schools safer for our students. So one thing we started doing a year or two ago was issuing cards, so access control cards to the PD, also fire, so that as part of their kit, they have a card that can get them into any one of our buildings in case of an emergency. So they're responding to a school. Whatever door they go up to, they can scan their card and get right in without having to break glass or do, fooling with the Knox box or any of that stuff. So that's something we've been working on. Another thing that our lockdown integration helps us do is have faster notification of dispatch in case of a lockdown. So we're just about to go live with this. What this does is when a lockdown is issued at a school, an alert is sent to dispatch telling them that a lockdown has been triggered and what building it was at. So then from their end, they can start issuing or dispatching police or whatever is needed to that location, and they'll start calling to get more information as well. And then another part of that is we've been working with dispatch to try to give them a live camera view. So in case of an emergency like that, a lockdown's triggered, they can pull up live camera access of that school and see what's going on in real time and say, okay, hey, you need to go to this hallway or you need to go to this end of the building. So all of that's just trying to improve our response with the PD and law enforcement. And then lastly, another thing we've been working on is radio communication with them. So now we've got a couple of their bigger radios so that in case of an emergency, we can take that on site and have better communication with them. We also have worked on at every building having radios for all of our staff there. So Dean, one of his hidden talents that I didn't necessarily know about when we hired him is he's kind of an amateur radio guy. And so he's been programming tons and tons of radios and getting those out to our schools, which I know they definitely appreciate and gives us just better communication. So that's just some of the examples of the level of coordination we've been doing. Like I said, we have such a great relationship with, whether it's the city of Coeur d'Alene or the county, we just interact with them very, very closely. So it's a good relationship.
Can you talk, Seth, about the role of the security personnel? What's their day-to-day job? What do they do?
Yeah,
I'm glad to see them. I just kind of want to know more information about them.
Yeah, so I'm going to let Dean come up and talk to them a little bit. Dean Keck is our safety and security coordinator, and he's going to introduce all these folks to you and talk a little bit about what it is they do day-to-day in our schools.
Thank you, everybody. So I'd like to introduce our campus safety officers. So starting on the, I guess this would be your left, we have Lake City High School, Stacy Westberg. You can go ahead and stand. There's Stacy. And then Connor Wilson. And then we have Coeur d'Alene High School is Chuck or Charles Kiesel. And then Edwin, and I'll probably chop his name, but Kowo. So, very good. Got it. So these are our campus safety officers for the two high schools, otherwise known as the Traffic Cone Gang. So thank you, guys. They come with great experience, ranging from previous campus security to military to probation to law enforcement. So we have a great group of people. They've been in the schools since they actually started the week before school, going through some training, and then they've been in the school from day one and already have had good rapport from them. Their basic role is campus safety. So they're not there to bust kids for smoking or anything like that. They're there to make sure that we're providing a safe place for kids, checking locked doors, make sure all the doors are locked, making sure that people are in class when they need to be, because they don't learn in the hall, they learn in the classroom. So they're making sure that they stay in class. And I've heard that they have had a higher attendance in classroom, and correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, I think you were talking about it, or somebody was talking about it today, that they've had a higher attendance in classroom since these folks have been in the schools. So they're not roaming the halls. So that's a good thing.
They see you coming. Yeah.
We can see them.
Or they're running from you.
They run to class.
If they do see a student breaking any sort of policy or rules, do they notify then, I guess, the SRO or the principal? Or?
Yes, they do. It's all about, I guess the word is their discretion. We're not there, they're not there to bust kids and bang heads and things like that. They're there to provide safety. So if they see a kid doing the wrong thing, they can go and try and correct them and get them steered on the right path, more than having them arrested or things like that. So it's just discretionary on their part.
Is it safe to say there are additional eyes and ears for the SRO?
Yes. A big part of it, too, is communication. So communication with the administrators, communication with the SRO. Like Dean said, another set of eyes on campus. As you know, our high schools are big campuses with a lot of entrances. And so part of their role is patrolling parking lots, patrolling the perimeter of the building, making sure doors are closed, stuff like that. So they definitely are there to provide another set of eyes and ears and communicate with the administrators or the SROs as necessary.
And I'd just like to remind us that their direct line of supervision is to half dean and half building administration. So they're our employees and are supervised by us internally. And so if you recall, we're under a contract with SRO, with the police department, both county and city, and they communicate with our SROs, but our SROs are not a part of their line of supervision.
Yeah, and I put Dr. Cook stole a little bit of my thunder there because I put an org chart up there just for reference, just to kind of show that. And as you can see, they interact with the principal as well as Dean as the safety and security coordinator. Day to day, though, it's really the building administration. And then the SROs are not our employees, as Dr. Cook said, but there definitely is a relationship there with the building principal kind of in the middle. And I also wanted to introduce to you John Pillmore. John is our security technician. He came to us from Post Falls School District, where he was the technology coordinator, worked there almost 20 years, I think, for Post Falls School District. So we definitely feel lucky to have him. I've noticed that we're getting a lot more done in my department because we're not having to always pull someone off other projects to go like real quickly fix a door, fix a camera or something like that. You know, those security items are high priority items for us. And what was happening before is we were having to pull someone all the time off of other projects. And so John's kind of helped us fill that gap. So we're definitely excited to have him on board as well. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
It seems like one of the things is teaching the staff about what's going or what can happen. When we were, I don't know if people remember when we were delivering apples on the first day of school, we noticed that one of the outside doors at CHS was propped open by looked like a book bag or something like that.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I understand that, I mean, convenient to that staff member, whoever's doing it, but it was obvious gap in security.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of the role of the CSOs. That's also on our list of projects, is having some audible door alarms so that if something like that happens, it just starts chirping until they shut it. That's something we would definitely like to take on at some point as well, because we recognize that as well.
I just want to say I love the idea of discretion for the four of you. I think it gives such a great opportunity for rapport building and relationships with these kids. And the kids you're going to run into are the kids that are going to need potentially somebody to talk to about something that's going on. And instead of going to their SRO, I can see you guys being a really good line of information as well, just to help in the overall security as things develop and your relationships with kids get better and better. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I would agree, and just want to welcome you guys. I remember, not because I needed to be redirected, but we had Carlos in high school, and I still remember him. Our campus was open. It wasn't all indoors. It was outdoors, and he drove a golf cart type thing, but everybody knew Carlos and loved him, and I remember him just from the relationship, too, that he, built with everyone. So welcome, and we're so excited to have the extra eyes and ears and feet on the ground at our big high schools.
Seth, can you talk about these live cameras? So how it works, and we've had this capability for some years, I think. It's not new.
No.
But basically, the officer drives up, has to punch in a keypad or something to access the cameras, right? And they can look around the hallways and see what's going on there. Obviously, like the campus security people, also maybe the SRO might already be involved, but that's only accessible during emergencies, right? It's not something where, I'm not saying this would happen, but if some officer just wanted to kind of look in the schools without a non-emergency, that's not something that they can do, right?
So if you're talking about the police department, that's part of their contract with us, is that they agree to certain sanctions around the data, and that includes the cameras. So they've had that ability for a while. The police can pull up the cameras in our schools. When we talked to them about that, though, one thing that came out was that in the case of an emergency, that's actually really not that helpful, because they're going to be flying to the school, going in to help. What they said would be helpful is for dispatch to be able to look and see and give them information over their radios. And so that's the part that we've been working on over the last probably 6 months or so. We initially started talking about it back in March with them, and then have kind of tested it with them a little bit. And so it is meant for emergency use only. We have the ability to look and see when people are looking at the cameras. So if it were used in a non-emergency situation, I think we'd want to address that with them as our partners, just as we would with, any partnership we have where they're misusing the resources that they've been given.
And I'm not concerned about that happening. I know I'm following up on an article in the Spokane paper a couple months ago that there was a big deal that, or to some people, that they were considering developing this capability in Spokane schools, and some people were complaining about that, those cameras could be misused. Now I know from having been around this district for a while that that's not happening, but I just wanted you to reassure us that all the controls are in place and that there's not been a problem here.
Yeah, and it's restricted to live view only, so they're not able to go backwards and search or export videos. So, it's pretty minimal. And if you've ever looked on our videos on our surveillance system, it's all in public areas, so it's all hallways, entrances, stuff like that. It'd be really hard to personally identify any student there. There's no names or anything like that goes along with it. It's just a blur of students. So live view only is one of the things that we put in place to really protect the privacy of our students when it comes to that.
So we haven't gotten to face recognition technology yet, huh? Anyway, thank you. I just wanted just clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Just kind of two things I want to highlight. One, I thank you all for coming down here tonight. It's 8 o'clock, so I'm sure it's the last place you want to be. One, they were all paid for with levy dollars, and so I just thanks to our community for supporting us and allowing us to add those extra eyeballs and help out in the field. Just real quick, and I shared this with Dr. Cook after the first day of school, but my daughter came home, who's a sophomore at Coeur d'Alene High, and said, "Do you know we have these new people walking around the school? They're in the, bright shirts." And I said, "Yeah, those campus safety people." And she said, "Well, what do they do? What are they doing there?" And so I told her, and she's like, "Wow, I'm really glad they're there." That's awesome. Just gave her some reassurance, I think, to have extra people there. She was excited about it. So you're getting noticed. So we're glad you're there too.
Cool.
So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm not going to say that we were way ahead of schedule before you got here, Dr. Cook, and now that you're here, we're way behind. But if I wanted to, I could.
I'll say it.
But let's move on. Item L.
All right, so math update. So since the last time we talked, I'm excited to announce that both Katie and Mike have attended training with CMSI, the agency that provided the feedback in the audit for us, and who will be providing feedback for the math audit as well. And so they're here to talk about that if you guys would like to. We've gotten initial notification that we should be receiving the math audit from them sometime either late this week or early next week. We expect preliminary data would indicate that it aligns. The feedback in that is going to align very similarly to what we got in the first curricular audit. And I think we will be prepared to give you a full report on that. If we wanted to workshop on it, we're glad to, but at least for sure by the October board meeting. So Katie, if you wouldn't mind, and Mike, if you guys wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the training, it'd be great as a kind of a starting point as to how we're going to start with the next steps of building, in essence, the curricular management plan and the assessment management plan out of kind of the next training pieces.
Thank you, Thank you so much, Superintendent Cook. Chairman Morris Rowe, and esteemed board. Yes, we had the opportunity to attend curriculum audit training in Phoenix in the middle of August. And we had a really great time learning about the criteria that was applied to our own curriculum audit here in Coeur d'Alene School District. We had the opportunity to talk with other school districts that were there, especially the Phoenix Elementary School District. We were able to get training on what makes a robust curriculum, what processes need to be in place for a robust curriculum management plan, and that helped us identify some next steps and will influence how we are able to interpret the math curriculum audit when we receive it, and help us prioritize and identify next steps.
Can't really add a whole lot more, actually.
So we'll use all of that information to inform the curriculum management plan, which will also include pieces of assessment, pieces of instruction, pieces of professional development. What questions might you have right now for me?
Is the new term robust now as opposed to rigorous?
I think we could call it rigorous and robust. Yes, I like both those terms. And we want our curriculum to be both rigorous and robust.
Okay, so that math feedback in a week or so. And then is the plan to, because we're teaching those classes, at least Math 1 and Math 2 currently, so we're going to try to incorporate that feedback rather quickly into the current courses?
Absolutely. We've already got enough information from them that we'll start with our very first point of influence on anything that we're changing curricularly. We'll start with math, and especially at the high school, to align all that feedback up to the training that's being provided, and to make sure that our high school folks are the first initial starting point with secondary math.
Well, and our 8th grade teachers that are teaching
612. 612 math will be the starting point once this is, if you recall, when we talked about this, was developing, we're still committed to this, it's going to take us some time, but still developing a 612 math scope, and then have a K-5 math scope that leads into a 612. And the part about 612 is providing multiple entry points, because if you go back just even 2 or 3 presentations, we've got kids coming and going anywhere from 6th grade through 12th grade, and there's got to be an entry point, and there's got to be exit points, right? They don't all necessarily need to go to Honors Math 3 to be able to graduate high school. And so what is that going to look like? And, we're getting there. It's going to take time, but we'll get there.
I forgot to ask it under the consent agenda, since we're talking about math, I think I can ask it here. I saw that we approved MAPS testing. I was curious what grades or what classes. And I also saw some English MAPS testing. That seemed exciting. I didn't know what grades that included.
I'll refer this question to our Director of Assessment.
Perfect.
Good evening, everyone. Chair Morris Rowe, Superintendent Cook, and members of the board. Yes, MAP testing is underway. We are currently in the fall diagnostic window, which will end on September 20th. Yes, we are continuing our work in high school mathematics with MAP testing, but we saw great feedback from our students and our teachers of how that was being used. We reached out to our English language arts staffs as well. And so each of our middle schools and high schools have opted in to both reading and language usage assessments in the fall. We'll then regroup with them, look at their results, start talking about the learning progressions that they provide, and then decide whether we wanted to continue doing that for a potential 3 times this year as well. Those results will also be included in our fall reports to parents.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to policy for information here. There are several. And is anyone presenting on these, Ms. Town, or are you? They're just for information, yeah. So the first one there, 4105, Lynn and I worked on that one just to make some changes, really some clear up. There was some
There was contradictory
contradictions
in parts of it, and I think the form and that process was just so too intense. There was just too much there, so we really just cleaned it up and clarified some of the language, and I think what we came up with is a much better process.
And we looked at, excuse me, several policies across the state, Boise, West Ada, Lewiston, Blaine County, Post Falls, Spokane School District, to really kind of get an idea what they were doing. And there's a mixture there, but I think we cleaned it up. So. Okay, the other ones, I think we're all legal recommendation type stuff, right? So all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 policies will be out for review for the next 30 days, and then we'll see them back next month for action. Any questions on any of them?
I only had one question. It was under the coaching one, so 5100, number 3. Well, it struck out number 3, so maybe it's now number 2. It just carries down potentially. But it's just talking about when considering coaching assignments in secondary schools, preference for hiring will be given to a qualified, certified professional employee. So that must be standard, I guess. That was ISBA's recommendation.
Yes, that's correct.
That's standard.
Typical, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. We're out of information stuff there, and well, superintendent information. Now we're going on to board reports. We have an information item, which is the concept of a student representative. If you recall, I think it was last month, Lillian Smith, who's out here in the audience with us, came and spoke with us about the concept of adding a student voice or student representative to our board meetings, and I think several of us kind of nod our heads at that. And so really just a discussion, kind of next steps. Do we want to pursue that? I think Dr. Cook has some ideas and how maybe that could dovetail with something I think he's looking to start, which is Student Advisory Group. Is that what you call it, SAG? So I don't know if maybe you want to explain a little bit about that and how it could work, and
Sure.
then we can talk what we want to do.
So the root of this is incorporating student voice into decision-making process, and not just only at the governance level, but I would suggest that that's a very valuable asset, even also at the administrative level. And so one of the things I'm familiar with is a process of creating and developing and maintaining a student advisory group that essentially would provide feedback and opportunities for student voice incorporation in a lot of different aspects, and actually using not just as a source of input, but having tasking the student advisory group with presenting and accomplishing certain kinds of goals for delivery of product and things like, we would like to, for example, we recommend this policy, whatever that might be. And from that student advisory group, you elect a leadership body out of that group, and then out of leadership would come, in essence, the responsibility and obligation to be informed on what's going on in the district, and they would have essentially a seat at the table and be a part of our board meetings. I would recommend that to be something that is ongoing and serving in the role of student leadership, whether that's a part of the school leadership, whether like Stuco or something like that, doesn't have to be or could be. The job or the idea here isn't necessarily to replace that work, but to give students both a voice in the process and to also have access to them as a resource. When we talk about things like Portrait of a Graduate, for example, we made sure that we've got so much feedback from students. Anybody that would come talk to us, we asked them to come. They gave us that. What I would recommend is establishing some kind of an ongoing committee that they're a part of, that we could both access and they could access us. And as a part of that, a byproduct of that would be student voice at the dais in some fashion.
So how about that concept or that idea? There would be details to work out. There's probably some policy that have to be done, which there's plenty of examples of it. When Lynn and I were looking at the policy around the public comments at board meetings, I came across several districts in the state that have variations of this. So there's policy out there to, we're not creating something new if we go down this path. So
I'm a
thoughts?
proponent. I think we should definitely delve into it. I think we should give the directive to Dr. Cook, with all the other things he has going on, that we should be looking at, a policy and how, and I like the SAG as well. I think that should also be, I would endorse that as well. That would be part and parcel to the student representative. Some of the thoughts that go through my head, I think, do we just have one? We have 3 high schools. What's the criteria? How do we balance that? So those are all details coming, but that's what's swarming through my head is, are we going to have a concern with equity and representation from all 3 schools? And so those are just things I'm thinking about.
I'd like to give Lillian credit. Her article generated a lot of feedback. I didn't even get to read all of it, but I heard from different people, oh, did you see that? And there was lots of community input on this whole concept, things that I hadn't even considered. I think student voice is important. I think governing bodies are also, it's a difficult, how do you weave that voice in? Some of the comments that I read were interesting about how long it takes to get up to speed as a trustee. In your first year, you're marginally effective. Second year, maybe a little bit better. And really, you don't get your full, hey, well, I'm like, it takes a long time. And
You're exceptional.
And so as we have students rolling in, year in, year out, I think to have that voice is a difficult thing to gain. So I think for me, it would have to be policy that delineates which conversations are appropriate for student advisory body to participate in. Meetings go long as it is, and I think everybody's time is valuable. And so how do we incorporate that voice? I like the idea of the SAG committee. I think that's amazing. I would also love to see a student sitting up here in the right circumstances, but I think there are some issues that we talk about that I don't know that are appropriate for students to engage in that conversation. We can hear their comments and feedback, but it could be from, an input from a different avenue, but we're sitting up here because we were elected by a community. And so I think it has to be the right balance, if that makes sense. But I'd like to see some more models where it's been done and how they do it and which ones you like and which ones you don't like. And kudos for Lillian for being here tonight.
Yeah, I like the idea of the SAG as well, because I think it addresses some of Ms. Brumley's concerns of representation and, that we have different viewpoints from different kids, and maybe even K-Tech students should be, some of our students that are K-Tech students maybe are included in that as well. And then, I'm not sure what the piece looks like here at a board meeting, whether it's kind of like the Stuco where they come in and they present on something, or if we have issues, we want, that student voice. That I'm not sure quite, I guess, how we work that out, but I think that's what we spend the next little bit kind of figuring out and looking at some ideas there and bring some ideas back and have more discussion around that.
I agree with what's been said, so I won't repeat it.
And I'd just like to thank Lillian for bringing it to our attention. Actually, I'm very grateful and thank you, and we're going to definitely take your feedback.
And it's courageous to get people online commenting, right? I mean, you did a fantastic job and it was very well written, so you should be proud.
Okay. Let's see, committee report stuff, we handled that already, long-range planning, right? And really the only other thing, calendar coming up, Lynn's got our next regular meeting on here, but I think we have a special board meeting as well, right? September 23rd, it's like at noon to 6. Yeah.
Oh, noon to 6?
Yes. Okay.
Getting
And that's it.
Lunch, dinner. We're going to be there long enough
Okay.
for everyone.
I'm going to, if nothing further, we're going to adjourn.